Welcome to another edition of the Royal Alliance UK podcast, episode 119, Riddle Me This. My name's Matthew Turner, alongside my co-hosts Steve, Tom, Ant and Ryan. How are you all doing, boys?
Yeah, good, thank
you.
I
see the puns haven't got any better.
That's not mine. I don't put my name to these anymore.
Well, Ant gave up making the names for them, so I had to come up with something, and I'm doing my best here. Come on, guys. Steve, you're back, my man. How are you doing?
Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years. I'm good. I'm good.
How's your time off been?
Yeah, I've not seen much football since the Super Bowl, but just like the last last couple of weeks, I've really got into watching some tape and starting to get into all the draft stuff. I think there's that bit at the end of February when free agency starts, which obviously doesn't involve the Lions, and you just a bit like, come on. But I think as the draft gets nearer and our Super Bowl looms closer, as a Lions fan, that's kind of when you get back into it.
Yeah, and you can tell that from the engagement from everywhere. It's going through the roof because the Lions fans love the draft. Just a bit of housekeeping to start. As always, don't forget our Discord channel if you're not a part of that yet. It's growing all the time. Lots of really good chatter in there. You'll get all of Ant's hot takes about some of the lower down draft prospects he might not have heard of as well. So it's well worth getting involved. Give us a DM on Twitter, or I'm sure I'll chuck up a link probably at some point during this pod. College Football Podcast is on, as always, last week talking about the last of the pro days. And Ryan, are you on this week? I've not heard any chatter as yet about that.
Yeah, we're back tomorrow. We're finishing off the pro day circuit, which is pretty much over now, bar LSU tomorrow. So just where the lines have been, how the players have done, and then we're doing mock drafts as well. So bring your mock drafts along, and you can judge mine and Ryan's. It's gonna be good fun.
The last Lions mock draft. There won't be another after this. Like I said, I'm not doing another. This is my finished finale one.
Don't forget the next two episodes we have are mock draft episodes as well, Ryan. So good luck with that.
Not changing, so.
Don't forget, please, to like and sub to the video, to the episode, to the pod, anything that you can do on that respect to help us out. Bump us up those rankings, would be much obliged if you do that. Don't forget as well that we are a Twitch affiliate now, so if you're not watching us on there and you are an Amazon Prime subscriber, you do get a free Twitch sub every month. You can chuck that our way. Please don't pay for anything because we're not worth that, but a free one, pass money from them to us, we'll go for that. That'd be great. And don't forget as well, I know that we have another distinguished guest from Pride of Detroit this week, but we interviewed Eric Schlitt last week in possibly one of the best interviews we've had ever. So do go and check that out if you haven't already. Right, enough housekeeping, boys. We're going to move into the news, and then we're going to have Ryan Mathews joining us for a short interview, and then moving into his thoughts and our thoughts about the quarterback class for the 2022 NFL Draft. And moving into the news, we're starting off with that the NFL have approved a rule change for overtime in the playoffs only. Both sides will possess the ball regardless of whether there's a touchdown or not. How do you guys feel on this one? Lots of people have had their say on it. It passed fairly easily, 29-3. And I don't think anyone has a massive issue with the change as a rule generally, apart from the fact that it's for the playoffs only. So did you guys agree with the change? Did you want to see it expanded out to the full league season? What's your take?
It's a step in the right direction, I think.
I don't want to change. No, I think it's fine. If you're worried about offense, overtime, just be better on defense. You will get the ball back. Like, just don't be crap and stop whinging. Like, don't try to fix something that ain't broke. So, and then to just put it in the playoffs is also farcical. That's just silly. So they just made a hash of this, really.
You 100% can't tell that Ryan's a defensive player from this, can you? I think nearly every defensive player in the NFL has come out against this. Like, well, if you're not good enough, then you're not good enough. But depends which side of the ball you play on. Yeah, win the coin toss. No, I don't. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, on the defense side, I get that. Most of us watch the NFL because, especially like this playoffs, it can be incredible to watch these quarterbacks go back and forth. And all this should do is generate more excitement, right? Because you're going to have extra chapters to games that otherwise would have been finished. So from a pure excitement standpoint, I'm in. And I guess that's why, because of the implications, they want it only for the playoffs. I don't really see why you do it for one and not the other. I don't think it impacts it that dramatically to just put it in the regular season as well. But yeah, I'm keen for it for the playoffs.
Yeah, I think for a TV audience, it's a no-brainer. I completely agree with Tom. You know, why would you deprive the TV audience of seeing both QBs when you've got like Mahomes going up against Herbert? So it's kind of a tap, really.
I mean, for me, the most fun thing about this, as someone who used to do mathematics in a past life and being a kind of game theory enthusiast, is actually trying to work out what teams are going to do now. So there's schools of thought about teams are going to want to take the ball and go for two immediately if they score a touchdown. There's a school of thought that you're going to want to go on defense to start with so that you can see what they do, and then you just have to better whatever the opposition do. I find the whole thing absolutely fascinating. If the team score a touchdown, they possess the ball first, score a touchdown, kick the 8-point after, do you go for two to end the game, which was a proposed rule change that got rejected? From that perspective, I absolutely love the change because it just got so predictable over time. You win the toss, you choose to receive the ball, and that's it. That's fine. And if you don't choose to do that, you might get fired as a coach. I think there have been times where coaches have been fired for not taking the ball in overtime because they literally don't understand what's happening, which is just shameful. So I kind of like the idea that it provides some uncertainty going into overtime. I think that's my biggest take from it, is I love the idea that it's not as predictable as it used to be now.
Maybe one for Anne Ryan, because obviously you are the college gurus here, but assuming they did make a change like they did you have any interest in them going to the college style overtime?
No, that gets a bit farcical. When you've got 8 overtimes and the score's 79, 81, no one in the NFL wants to watch that. And the players don't want to be a part of it either because they've got homes to get to. They'd never have taken part in that, I don't think.
Yeah, and starting on the 25-yard line, it's just like it's a very short field. I think at the NFL level, it'd be so easy to convert there, especially with how, open the playbooks are now with all your running quarterbacks and stuff like that. I don't think it'd transition too well.
I mean, I just hate the idea that someone says, "Oh, you went to 10 overtime periods," and it's like that's actually 2 overtime periods and 8 plays, or whatever the rules say it is. Is it 2 overtime periods and then it's just 2-point conversions or something like that? No, I hate that. It's like the soccer penalty shootouts done far worse. And people want to get rid of the shootouts. I can't stand the college system. Not for me. Anyway, moving on, a couple of bits of Lions news specifically. The Lions have apparently fielded calls for the number 2 overall pick, according to GM Brad Holmes at the league meeting. The free agent defensive lineman Arden Key, who did have a visit with us, ended up signing with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Much like every free agent this season has gone to Jacksonville for their career to die. However, DJ Chark, who's obviously come over from the Jags to the Lions, along with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Josh Reynolds, have all joined Goff in California to work out together, which is a really positive sign this early in the off-season. The Lions have sent 7 reps to Oregon's Pro Day and held extensive talks with Kayvon Thibodeau. And they're also apparently exploring contract extensions for both Amani Oruwariye and TJ Hawkinson. Finally, the start date of the off-season program for the Lions has been confirmed as April 18th, which is a 2-week thing that's going to go into the draft, as far as I'm aware, where players are going to come and they're going to go through strengths and conditioning, go through physical rehab, and have team meetings, but no actual play. So that's the start of the off-season for the Lions. What about the rest of that news, boys? It's promising news that the guys are already getting together to work out. Are we buying this number 2 overall kind of trade down talk, or is it just all smoke at the moment?
Oh no, I think we're legitimately trying to trade it. I think it's a horrible year to have the number 2 pick, as you can tell by the amount of arguments we're having about who we should take here. There's no clear consensus guy, and a lot of the reasons why there's so many different opinions is because people don't think these players are good enough for the number 2 pick. So I pray to God that it's true. I would like to trade back, get a few more picks, and still maybe get a good guy in the top 10. So I can absolutely see that happening.
We've talked at length as a group about how there's obviously people have favorites, but there's 4 or 5 guys that we'd be happy with taking it to. So I do think there's an interesting angle on the trade back. Like when fans think about trading back, we assume it's going to be perfect on the draft value chart and think of all the extra picks we get. But actually, there is an argument that if you do have a load of guys rated the same, you move back a few spots and you get bad value as far as the value chart goes, but picks are still picks. And if you don't have strong preferences on these guys, then I do think there's interesting view there. I can't see why anyone will come up, to be honest, unless the price is low.
I can't see there's no one worth number 1 this year, and there's no one worth number 2. Like I won't take any offer. I don't want to leave the top 11, so I don't want to just take any old offer of anyone that's stupid enough to trade up with us. So unless it's staying in the top 10, I'm just going to sit. But I think they're definitely entertaining moving back a few places, ideally with someone that's got an extra thirst. I don't want anything for 2023. I want capital for this year.
I do.
Yeah, agree.
All for 2023. Send it.
I think that I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors about this quarterback class. I think despite all the talk, and we've gone from will the Lions take Willis at 2, but then I've also heard people saying that there's going to be no quarterbacks drafted in the first round, which I think is ridiculous. I can easily see 3, maybe 4 QBs going in the first round. I just think that there are teams out there that have missed out in free agency and are going to be in win now mode. You look at someone like Matt Rule in Carolina. Surely he's going to be on the hot seat this year if that team don't perform. They need a quarterback, and you can see people like the Saints and the Seahawks jumping to get ahead. So I think there is going to be trade action. I'm not sure how it's going to pan out, but you can already see with the Saints-Eagles trade that, the pot is starting to simmer. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is a trade down partner for us, and I would absolutely bite the hand off anyone that wants to trade up to the number 2 pick.
A few comments coming in, hot topic on the previous thing and this. Loads of people kind of saying hello too as well. Detroit D, Super Saiyan Lions, Craig Ferguson. We've got Ashley Soden, Dan Pass, David Reinfurt. Thank you all, you guys. A few more that I've missed too. One Funky Lions fan. Thank you all for watching. Craig says, instead of overtime, how about each team selects their biggest eater and whoever wins a hot dog eating contest wins the game? Well, by that metric, I'd be a starter for the Lions. What else do we have? Super Saiyan Lion says he thinks that the Lions have a good chance to trade to either Atlanta, Seattle, or Washington. I think potentially that is a possibility. I know Ryan said, Tom said wouldn't take any. Oh no, Ryan said he wouldn't take any trade down offer. But in kind of working with Tom's theory, if there's 4 or 5 guys you like, then trading down from 2 to 5, you definitely get someone you want. And if you pick up a third to do that, and you still get someone you really wanted at 2, happy days, even though that's really not worth it by the charts. So I think there's a chance that we could trade down to some of those guys. I reckon Carolina's the one. I know they don't have the capital this year, but next year, who's most likely to want to trade up just a little bit, but we'll see.
They're not going to give away future capital for a dead man walking on the head coach.
Maybe not. So Steve mentioned whether he's on the hot seat. If he's not fired by week 5, if he's 0-4 at the start, I'll be shocked. And I think there's a good chance they'll go 0-4 to start. So we'll see. Probably be able to have a look at that. Ash confirmed what I was saying about the overtime and getting the call wrong. And apparently it was the Detroit Lions that had that problem. So in 2002, Marty Morningweg messed up against the Cardinals and got fired for making the wrong call, apparently. It's 20 years ago. I haven't got a clue, but I'll defer to him on that. A couple of other comments. Dan Pask says, hey, Royal Lions. Doesn't Brad's statement also show that he's not committed to Hutchinson either, which is a really, really interesting thought. So if Brad says he's exploring trade down options, and actually he was asked specifically I think if Hutchinson wasn't picked at 1, would you still entertain his offers? And he basically said that he would. What about you guys? If Hutchinson's available at 2, are you still thinking about trading down, or are you just running that pick in?
Yeah, but you think all this chatter about him being the guy comes from the fans, not from anybody else. So, it's not surprising that he said he still might trade. The fans are the only ones who really want him at 2. You don't know what the front office want with it. Like all the picks there, it's the fans that want them. It's not maybe necessarily the front office who've said anything in that regard. So, I mean, the one who got talked about most at 2 for the Lions was Kayvon. It talked about at the end of last year when we still had the first round pick that they were unanimously agreed on him, and obviously they've been big on him again. But outside of that, none of the others, you've not heard a whisper of them from Lions brass. I think they'd still go the trade back route. The value's not there at 2 really, if you can get a trade down option that's worth your while.
That's where it all comes down to value, right? Like what I was saying before, in terms of if you have guys on a similar level, then you can trade back for less. But if you do have Hutchinson, as in not fans, if the front office has Hutchinson way higher, then you're only trading back if the right deal is there. So obviously we have no idea how these guys are stacked. It makes me laugh a little bit because the discussion which we're tired of now is about the number 2 pick. And obviously the discussion which everyone got tired of at the end of the season was tank games, higher draft pick versus just go and win the game. And it's quite funny watching it almost come full circle in terms of if we had the number 1 pick. So everyone seems to be in on Hutchinson now. And it was like the number 2 pick didn't matter versus number 1. And now no one knows what to do with the number 2 pick. So I just think it's quite interesting to watch.
I think there's I think you can see that there's trash being talked about certain players to try and push their value down. You can see it with Thibodeau, and I just think there's so much like misinformation flying about that there will be several teams that will be desperate to get in the top 5. I think someone's going to fall in love with Malik Willis. I'm praying it's not the Lions, but I really can't see that. But I can definitely see us being able to trade down to maybe Seattle or Falcons if they fall in love with a QB, and we could trade down and get Kyle Hamilton. I mean, he could still easily be there around 8 or 9. So there's so many like intriguing options.
Yeah, there are. David asked the question that everyone wants to ask, which is about the Saints, but I'm going to defer that question down to when Ryan is with us, because it's actually a question that he was asked later on. So we'll discuss that a bit later and whether they're a viable trade option. What do you guys think about exploring contract extensions for Oriwari and Hawkinson? Because I feel like this is going to split opinion. I think that they are 2 fan favourites, but I'm not sold on this. What do you guys think?
No, I'm not extending either of them yet. Hawkinson has not shown me consistency, and RORE, I'm still divided. Like I say, he gets those cheap bargain basement interceptions, and people still then overlook that does often get burnt sometimes in coverage. Got decent recovery ability, but some of it is stat padding. Like I say, he's a good, solid cornerback. And yeah, I get the whole, he was mismanaged. He played under Patricia, who was a bit of a dick, like I say, but I'm not chucking any money at him yet until I want to see what he does this year. And Hawkinson, they've extended the 5th-year option, so I don't even want to consider talks yet. That tells me that they're not sure on him yet either. So I don't want to wait now because I know he's going to want a lot of money. Like I say, the tight end market has just got a lot hotter after this off season. So I'm not sold yet on extending either of them.
If I had to guess, I think if the deals are going to be done, you'll find them closer to the trade deadline next season than now. I think they'll want to see production at the start of next year as well, and health from Hawkinson before you start really putting in the long-term deals on there. That's what I do personally. I think they've both played well. DJ's played well when he's been on the pitch, and obviously had no receivers last year to help him out, so he was in a very tough situation. He's played well, and we know he can, and the same with Orowari. He had a decent year last year in a cornerback deficient room with a lot of rookies and that in there. If they can carry the former on, then absolutely. But I think we have to wait until we're a few games into next season before we do it.
with where the salary cap's going, so for Hawkinson, I'm happy to pay him. He would be, I imagine, the highest paid tight end in the league, which is fine for me because if you look again where contracts have gone, I'm just looking at the tight end contracts now. You have Kittle at 15, Kelsey at 14.3, Goddard at 14.3 as well, Mark Andrews at 14. And then there's a bit of a drop, but you risk some of these guys, them getting bumped up. And would I rather have TJ Hawkinson than Dallas Goedert? Absolutely. And I think actually if you lock him in now, we're seeing every offseason these crazy free agent prices and crazy contracts coming out. And they're only going to get more obscene as the salary cap keeps going up 15, 20% each year. So I personally would rather get ahead of it now. Hawkinson, yeah, I'm not convinced he's a top 3, top 5 tight end. I'm pretty happy he's a top 10 tight end, although admittedly he does have some injury issues. But I would get the deal done now rather than risk having him to pay way over the odds next year. Oruwari, I think I've said before, like I'm not sold. He definitely took a step forward last season, but yeah, I've just never been completely sold on him as a player. Again, it all comes down to how much he's going to get paid, but I would really worry about extending him now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to have to replace Hawkinson and end up using a first round number 8 pick again on the tight end. Like, we've been down that road. That if we can get him for a deal that makes sense financially, I think it's just a no-brainer to re-sign Hawk again. Oruwari, yeah, I think he needs to show this season in a better defense that he can produce.
I mean, at the end of the day, no one else takes tight ends in the first round unless you're the Cleveland Browns and then you tag him and he wants out. But apart from that, I don't think we'd be replacing a tight end.
Or the Broncos who've just used theirs as a make weight.
Or the Falcons who take one when they needed a quarterback and now they're going to suffer for it.
Indeed. Good examples, counter examples to what I just said. Hello to Prismeo, first time chat. Thank you for joining us, my man. Yeah, so for me, like with everything, it all comes down to the detail. If we're doing it early because for Hawkinson the price is cheaper because of his injury history, I'll jump on it. That's fine. If you want to be the 5th highest paid tight end now and we're getting you cheaper because we're not sure that you can stay on the field, but we're going to get a discount because of it, then fine. I'm okay with that. If you want to be the highest paid tight end in the league, I'm exploring trades right now because I've got no intention of extending you. So let's try and get a first round pick back if that's how much you're going to cost and then reinvest that in the team. If we have to, take another tight end in the first round and hope that he's better than Hawkinson, because at the moment, if you play 10 games a year, you might be in the top 5, but effectively you're not because you're not on the field. So, if it's at a discount, then fine. Same's true of Oruwari. If it's because we've seen enough to want to re-sign him, but we've not seen enough to pay him megabucks, and he kind of recognises that he's only got 1 year of production, so he doesn't take top tier money, I can kind of go for that if it's a 2 or 3 year deal. But I get the feeling that he's going to go, I got the 3rd highest interceptions in the league last year, pay me the money. And I'm fearful that we're going to start overpaying for guys that we're not 100% sold on. What happens if Amani regresses to what he's done in the last few years? And what happens if Hawkinson goes on IR all year, which, wouldn't be out of the realms of possibility. In fact, I would say it's decidedly likely that those two things happen. So,
yeah, but
you say these things worry me.
You say that though, but everyone was worried we were going to overpay Tracy and Charles this year, and we haven't. If there's one thing they've shown, they're very prudent with their deals, and if they don't feel the value's there, they won't give it. Because everyone's going, oh God, we're going to overpay Tracy for 1 good season. We're going to overpay Charles for 1 good season. We're incredibly happy with the deals we gave them. So I don't expect them to break character for a cornerback who's had 1 good year, breakout year, and a tight end who's got injury issues. I just don't see them doing that. I've got absolutely no worry that we're going to overpay anybody. If anything, we've shown that 99% of our deals have been cost efficient.
Yeah, I just don't see it as overpaying, I think is where I stand on it. Well, I'm sorry, I take that back. If we pay him 18 a year or something, yes, we're overpaying. But if you put him exactly the top of the market now, you're paying him a year or 2 later than the other guys' deals, but $750K a year more than Dallas Goedert? Nothing. 2.5 mil more than Jonnu Smith. 2.5 mil more than Hunter Henry. These guys are fifth and sixth in the contracts. So then you got Dalton Schultz at 7, Gesicki at 8, and Njoku at 9. So these aren't superstars, right? And I think that's just what you have to pay for a guy like Hockenson. Now, if he has a big season next year, he plays 16 games and he becomes a comfortable top 3, top 5 tight end, you might have to pay him 17, 18 a year. That's my concern with it. So I would be happy to, in that kind of 14 to 15 range, which covers the top 4 people in the league, I would be happy with something like that.
Makes a lot of sense. We've got Bob O'Lan, who I've not seen made a comment before, so thank you for joining us, my man. It says, Hutch at 2 would be like getting Saul at 7. Oh, wait. Let's see what else we have. Lots of chat about Malik Willis already. Don't worry, we will get there. In fact, we've got someone who is particularly akin with the argument coming on later on. In fact, I think that Ryan should be on with us shortly. Cool Down Rat says, first round tight end Pitts was number 4. You're absolutely right. I was overlooking that, mainly because he's a wide receiver and not a tight end, in my opinion, and he will be wide receiver 1 in that Falcons offense unless they take someone else. But I got corrected a second time by these guys, so it's not like that disclaims that either. I think Cool Down Rat actually had one of the questions coming up for Ryan later. In fact, this was about the New Orleans Philly trade, so we're going to be asking that shortly. What do you make about the Kayvon thing, just to kind of finish up the news segment here? So we sent 7 reps to go and see him, as it was mentioned before, kind of presumptive top of the draft guy pre-season in the non-quarterbacks, and the quarterbacks start falling. He's now the number 1 overall pick presumptive, and since that time he's done nothing but tank his draft stock through, let's say, sound bites that have been construed badly, as it was said perhaps earlier, that have been said in such a way to depress his draft stock in the eyes of the media. But are you guys buying that he's perhaps the number 1 option at 2? I think that Ant had a take that I kind of agree with on Twitter about this, so I don't know if I can throw this to you straight away, Ant, about what you think about us sending 7 scouts there, or seven people.
I think, well, all I said, in my opinion, when you send more scouts and staff to see a player, it's because you want as many opinions on the ground as you can. I think you send them to the players you're most conflicted with. The fact that Brad Holmes has gone, the fact that positional coaches have gone, area scouts are there. These guys are all going to have different opinions, and they're going to be looking at different things in regards to a player. So I think you need the most insight on the ones you're most conflicted with. With the other guys who we've done it, Hamilton, it was a small entourage. Willis, it was 1 guy, I think it was. Aiden obviously got a few because they're in Michigan and they all go to the local Michigan ones. But it says to me that they're very conflicted and they wanted as many viewpoints as possible. Don't forget, this is Brad Holmes' 2nd trip to see him, because he went to watch them when they played, I think it was UCLA, during the season. He's already been to watch Kayvon in game at least once, and now he's gone out there for a pro day as well. So he's really doing due diligence on him. So if we were to pick him at this point, I would at least be comforted to know that they've really put a lot of hard work and effort into deducing what's true about him and what's not true. And I would back their decision on it.
What about the rest of you guys?
I'm not bothered by all the people trying to bash him and all the sound bites. Like, from what I've seen and what the pre-draft process, like Verone McKinley, Michael Wright, they've hurt their stock. They've been poor working out. So it was easy to know that we were all there just to speak to him. They weren't looking at many others because a lot of them have shot themselves in the foot athletic-wise. I still think that his stock should be fine. Like I say, he's come out the other day and said, I am the best player in the draft, and people have tried to say that, will say he's arrogant or he's cocky. Like, what the hell is he supposed to say? If he genuinely thinks he's the best player in the draft, he's going to say it, isn't it? Like I say, I'm totally fine with that. Like I say, I think Brad Holmes in the photos having a good laugh with him. Chris Spielman is giving him a proper dressing down. You can see him glaring at him. I feel like he is good cop, bad cop, and that Chris is the bad cop. He's the one that really wants to see what this kid's about and if everything's true about him. Is he going to be a boom or bust? I agree. We had the other day that he could be the next Jadeveon Clowney. He's got that potential to be a star, but can he live up to it? Because Jadeveon to date hasn't. I think the Lions will take Kayvon at 2. I think they have probably seen enough now and heard enough now to have made their mind upon him that he's the guy that they need to kickstart this pass rush and put a rocket up the arse of the defense. So I'm fine with that. If they take him at 2, I will have no qualms, even if I know that he often sometimes takes the odd play off, and against the run he can be susceptible. But I'm willing to overlook that and trust everything that I've seen and heard now, because at least we've done thorough research. We've sent everyone in the kitchen sink to go see him.
Yeah, I think. I mean, there's so many different angles here. I completely agree with Ant in terms of the more coaches send, that just says there's uncertainty in the room and that no one's got a clear take. It also sends a massive message to the rest of the league that says we're really interested in Kayvon Thibodeau, and if anyone wants to get him, they need to trade up and take our pick. So that's the other thing. In terms of what Thibodeau has actually said, he's not really said anything that you could construe as like outrageous. If he says he's the best player in the draft, people say he's arrogant. If he was to say, I think I'm the 27th best player in the draft, people would say lacked ambition, lacked fire. I mean, everyone's looking for a story, and there's been a big pile on Thibodeau. But personally, I think if we were going to make a reach for, an edge rusher, if Hutchinson wasn't there, I think they'd probably go with Trayvon Walker because there's a higher ceiling. Like, why swing for the middle in terms of like edge rushers? I think they're very much looking to trade down, and I don't think Thibodeau is particularly on their radar because we could be facing a 5-12, 4-13 season, and I can't see Thibodeau's temperament being particularly suited to another tough year in Detroit.
Yeah, I do have concerns over a market like Detroit for a character like that. He feels like a guy who would ideally be West Coast, something like that, winning team or more successful team in his eyes. So there are definite concerns. We actually had a really good chat about this on our Discord channel, how do listeners find our Discord channel?
I'll tweet out a link, or that's pretty much it really. We'll kind of talk to people and then send it on in a reply. I think Ant's done that a couple of times, so that's pretty much it.
Awesome, because I always learn things in that channel, so it's a good place if you want to talk Lions. We had a really good chat about it, and yeah, my view on it is he is the guy that I would take it to now, assuming Hutchinson was off the board. I haven't actually wavered from that at any stage. Well, I've definitely considered other people, but he's been the guy, and I don't see a reason not to. That's mostly because we're not in the meeting rooms, we're not in the interviews. All we get is the media interviews, and I don't really judge people off that massively. To the point around the 7 people, the media will do anything right now to drill home this narrative about Thibodeau. Jeremy Reisman had a comment about this today on Twitter, how they basically took a quote from Thibodeau basically saying, coaches can't kind of point things out to me that I haven't seen myself, because he was talking about how he's always self-scouting, seeing how he can get better. And the quote that came out was, coaches can't teach me anything. And it's just, you see this kind of thing the whole time in terms of media trying to manipulate quotes which fit the narrative, because as we've discussed already earlier on this pod, on the past few pods, people are getting tired of the same discussions at the top. And so if that adds a few clicks, if that adds more interest, then that's what they'll go for. So is there no smoke without fire? Probably not. I'm sure there are definite character concerns with Thibodeau. Do I think he's the best player if Hutchinson is off the board? Yes. And therefore, that is why I would take him.
Yeah,
has he got the highest ceiling though, Tom?
I think you could argue Trayvon Walker, given the athleticism, does. But in terms of what I've actually seen on tape, Thibodeau has done the most freaky things out of any of those guys. Definitely more so than Hutchinson, but actually for me, more than what I've seen from Walker. Obviously, with Walker, you're betting there is untapped upside, but you don't even really get those flashes. With Thibodeau, I think the problem is you definitely get those flashes where you think, oh, this is a Myles Garrett, a Nick Bosa, a Chase Young, etc. But you also get inconsistency along the way. With Walker, you never see that. You see the testing and you think it should be in there, but partly because of the Georgia scheme, but at no stage do you really see things which I'm like, wow, that is the next star pass rusher in this league. You see really cool things like in the national championship game where he ended up running 30 yards downfield, full speed to make a tackle. And you're like, this guy's an amazing athlete. But I didn't really see anything which made me think this guy is going to be a top 5 all-pro edge rusher in the league. Again, not to say he won't, but I don't necessarily think his ceiling is beyond Thibodeau in that way.
And you also have to take into account the other mitigating factor that, he operated in one of the best defenses in college football history last year. Trayvon Walker did. I mean, when you've got Jordan Davis collapsing the pocket from the interior, you've got Key Walker, Devontae Wyatt, all these guys creating pressure as well. It also helps you, whereas Kayvon at Oregon, they've got a decent pass rush there, but he is by far the guy who takes a lot of the attention, who takes, a lot of the pressure is on him to create there. Whereas, with Trayvon, that was never the case at Georgia. They could just rotate in and out because they've got that many guys there. I mean, when you see a guy like Jermaine Johnson not able to get a look in, it just shows you what the depth is like. So he's now going to have to come to a team and be the star guy. And can he do that? Kayvon has done that before. He hasn't.
I mean, I think the thing that excites me in a trade down scenario is if you have a look at pass rush win rate, Trayvon Walker's well down there. But the guy that's actually up with Kayvon Thibodeau is George Karlaftis, who's fast becoming the forgotten man of this edge class. And the idea that we might be able to trade down to 11 with Washington and be able to take Karlaftis there would be massive for me in terms of getting edge and extra picks to be able to spend and make this team even better. I feel like Karlaftis could be one of the steals of the draft at this point if he continues to fall, and that fits with where the NFL have him as well. So there's so much choice in this edge class that it almost feels to me like it's hard to go wrong. So one of those things. We did have a question come in from someone. We are waiting for Ryan, but he's been stuck in traffic, so we're just going to get to a few more of your questions. If you do have any, do get them in. I think we should only be waiting another 10 minutes or so. There was a question from, if I don't click on someone's name, that will help. From David Reinfurt on Twitch. He says, your thoughts on Sauce Gardner? What's an appropriate pick to get him at? And we did profile secondary players, I believe, earlier on in this cycle. So if you want to have a look at what we all said at the time, then please do go back and have a listen to that episode. But Tom, you seem to indicate something there, and for our audio listeners, what do you reckon about Sauce?
Number 2, that's where I would be more than happy taking him. I think with the exception of Malik Willis, who we will talk about later, and I'm not saying we take Malik Willis, Gardner would be the player that I am next most excited about us taking. I don't think we will take him there, but I love him as a player. And again, part of that might be because we're sick and tired of hearing the same names at 2. I don't know. But I've always been a big Gardner fan. And I just, even though I think fans might lose their mind over it, I just think he's a fantastic player. And in a draft where you question some of the blue chip talent and we can't really decide who's ahead of who, with the exception of Hutchinson, which most people seem to have at the top, I absolutely think Gardner is in that next tier of prospects with Thibodeau, with Walker, etc. So, I'm not necessarily banging the table for us to take him at 2, but I would be very excited if we did.
And Steve, thoughts on Sauce?
I'm not keen. Not that I don't like the player. I just, there are other areas I'd rather invest in first. And, corner's one of the areas where we've potentially got so much untapped potential at the minute, and the draft is also quite deep for cornerbacks. You could probably go back to round 3 or 4 and find someone who's going to be, effective in our system. Don't forget, we got Mike Hughes to bed in now as well. I mean, I just feel like the pick could be spent better elsewhere, but it is absolutely nothing against the player. If we're talking last year's situation in the draft, and we've got the same draft classes this year, then I'd 100% maybe go for him early, because we need a corner desperately. But if we trade down, then fine, but not at 2. Just a preference thing, nothing against the player.
For me, corner isn't one of the top 3 team need positions on defense alone. Like, for me, it's edge, it's linebacker, it's safety. Those have got to be the defensive picks. I think this has got to be a defensive draft for us, but it would break my heart to take a corner at 2, particularly after the Okuda experience.
I think for me, I would, given no quarterbacks at the top of the draft, I would be absolutely fine taking Sauce at 2 in a vacuum. The thing is that I don't think that he would go earlier than 3. I think that 4 at the Giants is the earliest he can go. So I'd be asking the Texans if they want to trade up for like a 4th round pick or something, because I'd be confident if I wanted Sauce, they wouldn't have picked him at 2. But that's really nitpicky. So I would be happy taking Sauce at 2. I think he's got the production. I think he has got the traits. I think he's got the mentality. He's another one who's just come out and said he's the best player in the draft. And you know what? I'm not sure that he's wrong. So cornerbacks always have a hard rap coming into the league, especially first-round corners thrown into it. I'm confident that he will struggle in his first half season. So if the Lions pick him, I'm sure the front office are going to be prepared to be lambasted for the pick, and then the production will show that to start with. But by the end of his contract, I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the premier secondaries in this league. Just a thanks to Derek Bobarek, who's gifted another sub in the Discord channel, this time to CJ Craig. Thank you so much for that, my man. Thank you. What else do we have? Sorry, Jets at 1-4, Giants at 1-5. I meant Jets. Giants also could go corner too. My bad. What else do we have?
Just while you're finding questions, Steve, you mentioned Okuda there in terms of the pick at 3, which I think obviously is it hurts a lot of Lions fans to think about how that went. It's quite interesting when you go down that draft though, because a lot of people now say Okuda, disaster, bust, etc. And he could well be. I'm hopeful for this year, but obviously hasn't gone to plan. But you look down that draft and take the quarterbacks out of it, and it's pretty barren in the top 10 in terms of guys that could have gone elsewhere. So if you just go down the list, Andrew Thomas, he actually stepped on at the back end of last year, but everyone was saying he was the biggest bust of the class in year 1 when you saw those other tackles take off. Tua was part of the kind of media discussion for the Lions. Obviously hasn't really panned out for Miami yet. Herbert, obviously, yes, but he was never really a discussion for the Lions. Derek Brown was a big discussion. He has really not delivered. And all the people who said you can't take him at 3 because he's a defensive tackle, you can't get after the quarterback, have kind of been right. So would we have been that happy had we taken him? Isaiah Simmons, unicorn guy, he can do everything. Again, has not delivered. CJ Henderson, off his team. So you look at all these guys, and obviously Okuda's been really unlucky with injuries, but they're really the other guys we would have gone for, and none of them have panned out. So I do think it's interesting looking back on that draft in terms of, obviously, I would have loved Okuda to turn out to be a better player, not to be a better player, to have delivered more on the field, when obviously he hasn't had the chance yet. But I'm not saying I'd be any more delighted with any of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Okuda was a bad pick. For me, I thought that was the right pick. It's just turned out to be a disaster in terms of circumstances. And I just think from a fan base point of view, having invested in such a high pick at corner, I just think it would be, I'd be sweating every time he came. You know, if we took Sauce at 2, I'd just be sweating every game. Every time he, clutched his knee, I'd just be like.
And I think compared to obviously the no pun intended, the safety in a pick of someone like Hamilton, another DB, who you have just such a lower concern, unless there's anything injury related, is gonna struggle, I guess, in that sense. Then yeah, I mean, I get it would be tense at times, I think, for Lions fans.
We have so much chatter. I'm struggling to keep up, actually, in parts, so that's good. Lots of people saying hello from across the pond. Super Saiyan Lion said the Cardinals are using Simmons wrong. That's why he's not doing particularly well. John Robinson and a few other people, Craig Ferguson, are saying that if Gardner was grabbed at 2, the fan base would riot, which I'm completely in accordance with. But
I think what we're saying is that the linebackers usually work out pretty well here, because there was a good linebacker last year who's also done pretty well compared to some. So
I have no idea who you're talking about.
There's a really good linebacker this year as well, if you really want to go crazy for the house here. And he's going to be an amazing player. We said,
You're a Quay Walker fan too, are you?
Get the hell out of here. You know damn well I don't mean Key Walker. Well, because Luke was talking the other day about thinking outside the box and players there, and Devin Lloyd would make 100% sense, I think, if you're thinking outside the box. Do it all linebacker, and the linebackers seem to have... Everyone goes positional value for linebackers, but I think Simmons did all right last year. Parsons has done really well. These linebackers at the top produce. So, it sides with me. Results do.
In fairness to the Lions front office, it doesn't take much to make the Lions fan base riot. So yeah, I mean it's going to be a tough pick, isn't it? But yeah, and for me, linebacker, safety edge. I just think that's where we absolutely are crying out for help. And whereas Gardner, if Gardner's still there at 32. But I just don't think he will be.
Will you riot if there's no linebacker taken on day 1 or 2 of the draft? Because obviously there's some things this week coming out around Lions out on linebackers this year, etc., which again we discussed on Discord. I don't necessarily believe, but I definitely think there's a realistic chance that we don't take one until 97 or maybe after that, and then I think fans are going to be,
I will riot in the top 2 days. I don't believe for 1 second that Jeff knows what he's talking about in regards to this. You've seen him all over Twitter going, "Oh, I told you so, they're not going to go." It seems to be a petty thing for him where he's telling people we're not going to take a linebacker, and then he's saying that we're not going to now. But I get this. We hear the argument that, linebacker's not really important to scheme or anything like that, and it's one of the least valued positions in the home-based defense. But look at the linebackers. They at least have to be competent to a degree. Now, Anzalone's a placeholder for when we get a solid vet to come in and take the role there. Barnes is still developing as a linebacker. It's his second year, and he's got a lot of work to do. And then what have you got after that? You've got Pittman, who's a special teamer. You've got Dion Hamilton, who's a special teamer. You've got Board, who's a special teamer. Yes, they have upside in the linebacker position, but not one of them is more linebacker than special teamer. So your quality level is very low, even for a system that doesn't put emphasis on linebackers. There's not a lot of quality there at the minute. And I would be shocked and appalled in a way if they did not try to strengthen it in one way. It only needs to be one guy, because then you've got Barnes, your new guy, and Anzalone, and you've got a lot of development, rotational talent behind them to try and blood in. But to do nothing about it would be criminal in my eyes.
Yeah, I'd love for us to take Devin Lloyd or Kobe Dean, but it's situational, isn't it, in terms of how the board falls. I mean, if the board fell, so we took Hutchinson and then say Briscoe at 32 and Christian Watson at 34, I'd kind of be okay with no linebacker. But if we kind of, because that's the kind of dream scenario for me, something like that. But if we end up like compromising and not getting the right player and no linebacker, I think it would be a disaster, because it's just where we've been so barren for several years now. And the Jared Davis re-signing didn't fulfill me with massive confidence that we're on the right track in that area.
Just wait until we take Zion Johnson and Roger McCreary at 32 and 34, and with all those guys left on the board.
To be honest, I wouldn't mind Zion McCullum. Ryan wouldn't either. I think we
no,
both,
sorry,
we
Zion
both
Johnson, as in
Zion
guard.
To be honest, yeah, no, it won't be great. But at the end of the day, he's a hell of a player. So
yeah,
it would be upsetting, but at the same time, we get a damn good player. So we can't go wrong with that.
Just want to welcome in.
I'm just looking at my mock and everything you're saying. I'm just thinking, taking out ideas on board.
You said you're not changing your mock, Ryan, so don't give us that. Just want to welcome into the podcast Ryan Mathews from Pride of Detroit.
Steve read my mind.
There we go. Sorry, Ryan. Thank you for joining us, man. Sorry about the hold up in traffic. I hope you weren't too rushed coming in. And how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you guys? Thanks for having me on the show. I'm still in my my work clothes, so I still feel like this is very formal.
Oh, there's no dress down Tuesday where you are then?
No, nothing like that. Taco Tuesday.
That's not so bad. Just going to kick off with a few questions for yourself and then get straight into this QB chat. That's cool.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
All right, let's do it. Just to start off with, you've been a fan of the Lions for a long time. I saw your kind of intro stuff when you first joined Pride of Detroit, talking about, being a fan since it was the Silver Dome and what have you. What brought you into writing and podcasting about the team? Is it something that you kind of always wanted to do, that you maybe did before as a hobby and then this came up, or did Jeremy and Chris be like, hey, we're doing this thing, or what happened?
Yeah, so the genesis of the podcast is an interesting story because it's something that myself and Chris Burfett, we both kind of spearheaded at Pride of Detroit, because it was something that I know Sean Ewell, who originally ran Pride of Detroit, and Chris and I were actually part of Sean's last batch of hires. So Sean hires us in the summer of 2015, and I'm not kidding. I think 2 weeks later, he goes, all right, I'm done. I'm handing everything off to Jeremy. So like Sean was my boss for like 2 weeks, and I don't think I edited a single article over those 2 weeks. I don't think I wrote anything over those 2 weeks. I just kind of idly sat there and was like, oh, cool. I'm part of this like little, website called Pride of Detroit. And, from there, it just really took off. And, before I knew it, I was writing fantasy football articles. I was doing daily fantasy football articles because Jeremy wanted nothing to do with it.
And still doesn't.
Still wants nothing to do. He wants fantasy football to die a slow, arduous, awful death. And that's fine. That's his opinion. But yeah, that was really how I broke into things. And, he gave me complete freedom. And, I can't thank Jeremy enough for what he offered me in terms of an opportunity to really kind of develop my voice and to try different things. Like he was willing for me to throw anything at the wall to see if it stick. It was 1 week, it was, here's your best lineup. And then the next week, after failing terribly, it was, all right, these are the players you shouldn't start. And, then, a couple weeks later, it was, all right, you know what? Here's my mom's attempt to put together a fantasy football lineup. So he gave me complete freedom and complete creative control over, an article that he wanted nothing to do with, but that level of trust really went a long ways. So kudos to him for that. And then, he, to kind of circle it back to the podcast, it was something that Sean dabbled in a little bit, but didn't really do with any regularity. And Chris wanted to bring regularity and I guess some form of, consistency and sustainability to having our voice out there. And, we started it up with, I'm going to be honest with you guys. There was a third man to the podcast who was there when we resurrected it. I have no idea who his name is. Like, I have no idea who that person is. I can't remember who that person is whatsoever, because it was so long ago. And when we did it, it felt like, okay, cool. That was a fun way to spend 2.5 hours, but this isn't going anywhere. And, to look back on that 7 years ago, man, like it's really turned into something that I couldn't foresee it ever becoming. And then on top of that, like, it's really just because of the community, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are a part of that community too, of just Detroit Lions fans that make a lot of the stuff possible.
Yeah, absolutely. The community is a huge part of everything that goes on. It's something said, but it's not a trope that the Lions fans are really passionate. I mean, you kind of have to be a fan of the Lions, because if you're not, you'll soon find another team. So they kind of
Right.
weed out the weaklings of that crop.
For sure.
So I've heard you speak about on the pod that you're a teacher. I don't actually know what you teach. What's your subject?
I teach English. Yeah, I teach language arts, and
Oh.
I also am in charge of the school yearbook. So, yeah.
Okay, that brings up a couple of questions. What's what's like the worst entry you've seen in the yearbook? Like, the prototypical yearbook you see in America is like a kind of picture with a quote, isn't it, or something underneath?
Yeah.
Have you seen like one that's made you kind of go like, wow, maybe we shouldn't put that in, or something?
Yeah, for better or for worse. I don't know if I can share the worst one that I've gotten, but you would not be surprised at the kind of things that teenagers will try to sneak by me. And it's like, I have a Twitter. Like, I am way more up on things than you can possibly imagine. Like, I know when you try to slip by a quote from a porn star, that's not gonna fly. But a lot of them have a lot of fun with some of the best quotes that I've seen, though, because a lot of them are just bad. As a teenager, as a 17-year-old who hasn't gotten out into the world, they are trite. They lack originality. None of them are creative. But every once in a while, there are a few that come by that I'm just like, oh yeah, that's awesome. Like, there was a girl who quoted The Undertaker, but called him Mark Calloway by like his real name. And I just thought, I was like, you are so far removed from being a fan of professional wrestling. There's no way that you're a fan of The Undertaker, much less knowing his actual like legal name, Mark Calloway. Like, it's insane. But yeah, the yearbook it's a lot like editing, though. It's a lot like my role in that class is a lot like the role that I have at Pride of Detroit. It's a lot of overseeing. It's a lot of, editing. It's a lot of making sure that things look good before they get to the public eye.
And I guess you kind of being a teacher and having to speak in front of kids all the time, and also being an English teacher and having to know correct syntax, and no, it's not a semicolon there, it's a colon, or it's a comma, or whatever. Like, kind of doing all of that must help you in both the writing and the speaking aspect of what goes on, because I know for all of us, none of us being trained in this sort of thing, kind of the learning curve for speaking. And I mean, so Steve's only just returned to the podcast over hiatus with work, and kind of came back and said, you guys have really improved since I was last on. And it's one of those things where, like, we've gone from not being able to speak particularly well to where we are now, which is, I don't know, average. I think Chris Perfett might say that we were average.
Might say that you're adequate, right?
Adequate, true.
Speak for yourself.
So, do you think that's helped you in your development doing all of this?
I think so. Yeah, I was actually helping out a former student of mine who's pursuing a career in education himself. So he sent me some emails, some questions that he wanted for me to answer that his professor had given him. And the last batch of questions he gave me were what were some of the things that were the biggest obstacles that you had to overcome when you were first starting as a teacher. And like, I mean, I think it's natural that a lot of people have stage fright, right? Like, getting up in front of a group of people and, worrying about like, where is their attention at? Is my zipper down? Like, just like 1,000 thoughts cross your mind, and you're like, I hope that I am presentable first and foremost, and secondly, I hope that you're listening and caring about what I have to say. And you develop that, right? Like, and it comes with practice. And I think that probably a lot of you guys can attest to this. Like, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And it's like football, man. It's like reps. If you're getting more reps in training camp, you're probably going to get some play time. And that's just how it works with, podcasting and stuff like that. I had zero formal training. I'm adequate at best myself. Chris stole that moniker from everybody else. So like, it was this easy way to be like, oh, I can excuse all of my hiccups and all of my mistakes by just calling myself adequate. So he stole all of that opportunity from us. So, but rising tides and ships and all that stuff. So
there we go.
Yeah.
I know that that our own Ryan is on the clock at the moment, so we're going to get through a few more questions and then get straight into the QB stuff. So,
for sure.
Just quickly, your favorite moment on POD to date, if you ignore Jamal Williams, because I really think that's an easy answer.
Yeah, my favorite moment by far is the interview that Jeremy and I did with Herman Moore and Lomas Brown. And I'm not sure if any of you guys listened to that podcast, but I think it was after we finished recording. I couldn't let Lomas go. So I applied for Pride of Detroit when I was working for Coca-Cola. So I was working full-time for Coca-Cola. I was going to school at the same time. I was waiting on a delivery in the back room of a grocery store, and I was sitting on a huge pallet of 12 packs of Coca-Cola. And I'm editing this mock article about Ryan Broyles' injury to send to Sean to see if I can, be a part of Pride of Detroit. So I send it off. But while I'm working for Coca-Cola, on the route that I'm on, every Sunday morning, I see Lomas Brown in the dairy aisle. Every Sunday. Every Sunday, I just say hello to him. I don't make a big deal about it. I'm not like, oh my God, you're Lomas Brown. I just go, how you doing? And he would always just really friendly respond and say hi and always have a smile on his face. And Jeremy and I do that interview. And the whole time I'm like, this is the dude that just like walked by me while he's talking, 2% milk and ice cream flavors with, the guy who works in frozen over in the grocery store. And, I go, Lomas, I have to tell you this, but like, I would always see you at this grocery store, in this city, in Waterford, Michigan. And you were just always the most polite guy. And I just wanted to let you know that it was really cool, like interacting with you in that way. And he's like, you know what? He's like, he's like, that was part of my Sunday routine. Like I would go to the grocery store, I'd get my groceries, I'd come back and I'd watch the Lions game. And that was probably my coolest moment because it was where like all of my worlds kind of like merged and collided. And it was like, oh my God, like this might be the summation of my life.
Got a few questions from guys on Twitter just before we came on to get through, and a load of guys have been asking us in the chat, and I've been deferring this question until now. Cool Down Rat on Twitter was the first person to ask, and I know that you addressed this yesterday on the pod, but I'm going to ask it anyway. The New Orleans-Philadelphia trade, how does that affect at all, if it does, Detroit at 2? Do you think it has any impact?
I am of the mind that they made that trade to move up again. And I don't think they make that trade unless they have a bigger jump in mind, because why not just package 18 and some future first round picks if you want to move up just a little bit? If you want to move up just a little bit, you can do that. But now they have the ammunition to move up in the top 5. And I think that has to factor into what, the Lions are picking at 2. Brad Holmes talked about how they're open for business. There's multiple players at multiple positions that they can turn the card in and they can sleep easy at night. So it seems like, and the most telling thing is I think that the question that Jeremy asked Brad was, would you be comfortable making the trade regardless of knowing who Jacksonville takes at 1? And Brad Holmes was like, yeah, like we can make that trade regardless of who they take at 1. So all signs point to the Lions being open for business. And I really hope that, New Orleans can offer them some kind of Godfather package that has Detroit move back, because I've talked about this before, but, I was so envious of the position that the Philadelphia Eagles were in. We keep talking about this draft being one that's so heavy on depth and kind of light on blue chip prospects, and having a top 5 pick isn't exactly a glamorous thing in this year's draft. So moving back definitely has my attention.
we have Michael Lucchese on Twitter who said, could you see the Lions taking a developmental prospect at quarterback this year, i.e. Zappy, Glass, etc., which is kind of what we're going to get into later, but can you see it generally? I mean, do you think that Blau is solid at quarterback 3? I guess is maybe the question.
Maybe. I think Blau fits that role of the quarterback 3, right? He's the guy who you don't necessarily want to see on the field, but does a lot of good work behind the scenes. I think that's your quarterback 3. If you're going to roster 3 quarterbacks, most teams rostering only 2 quarterbacks, especially once you become a team that's in contention, you're not using that extra roster spot on a quarterback 3. So I think Blau is serviceable in that role. Could he be improved? Yeah, he could. And, but there's a trade-off there, right? Like bringing in Bailey Zappy it's interesting, it's new, it's exciting, but does he have the wealth of knowledge that David Blau has? I'm not sure.
Right, final one, and then we'll just see if the guys have any questions. But Tribnik on Twitter said, and this is something that is basically verbatim what was said last night, but is Matt Corral slipping, or are people just keeping quiet?
Matt Corral is an interesting case study in what happens when you get injured late in the season, right? Like he didn't have an opportunity to show up at the combine and to throw and to do drills and things like that. I think it's kind of like the inverse of Kayvon Thibodeau, right? Like I think there's a lot of prospect fatigue with Thibodeau. I think there's a lot of, okay, we're sick and tired of this guy being the number 1 overall pick in every single one of our mock drafts. And then people start to poke holes, right? And I think a lot of people have done the same thing to Matt Corral in a way, in the sense that, we last saw him so long ago that he's kind of fallen out of our, the forefront of our minds. So, yeah.
All right, boys, any questions for Ryan before we move on to the QBs? All right. No, right, we'll move on straight away then
Perfect.
to the quarterbacks. So, Ryan, you're going to take us back to back for your picks, just so if you have to slip off, then you can. And we're going to start off with Skylar Thompson from Kansas State, one of the maybe late guys on day 3 to look at. What have you seen from him?
Yep, Skylar Thompson, Kansas State Wildcat product, 6'2", 100 kg, 220 pounds. He'll be 25 in June. He's had 5-year career from 17 to 2021, 7,000 plus yards, but only 42 touchdowns and 16 interceptions in that time. He has had a season-ending serious shoulder injury and a knee injury that did hamper him last year. So there are been blows there, but watch the film. I've seen his games. I watched the film when they beat TCU and then the KC Network highlights. He's got quite a strong arm. I've seen him for opposite hash lines, so he can go between the 20s and he can move well across the field. A nice fast release as well. I see the ball snapped. I see the eyes up. I see him make reads, and then he gets the ball out quickly. Whether that's dumping it off to Juice Vaughn, his dynamic running back, or taking a shot downfield. A measured approach he plays with. He's got a nice zip there, throws the ball with a nice velocity. And he also evades pressure well. I've seen him come up and he sidestepped a defensive tackle, someone that's broken for the defensive line, and he's looked to scramble out to mainly to his right. I didn't see him turn all the way around and go to left, so he does feel like he favours one side more. But throwing on he keeps the feet down. He doesn't throw too heavily on the back foot, but he's got a nice release there and does well on the throw. So he did have average testing for a quarterback that's not too heavy. He ran a 4.90, 140, which isn't great for someone that would probably have to be a dual threat dynamic athlete to make it onto a roster there. But the biggest worry thing for me is that for 40 plus starts, only 42 career interceptions. You can take into account the injuries, but he only really accounts for 1.1 touchdowns per game in the career. So I feel like he's very safe, which is too safe. He doesn't take those risks. I see him sometimes pass on the deep ball and then take a check down or hit someone across the middle. I don't know if that's because he doesn't trust the arm or he's just scared of making a mistake or a turnover. I don't see him starting at the next level, but I feel like he could go that 6th, 7th, probably a priority undrafted free agent, but he could make a potential QB3. back up next year if he can prove those injuries won't hinder him long term. But I have seen him linked to the Lions in like the 7th round or a UDFA flyer. So there's a lot to like there. There's a lot. He's just had a very hampered college career, unfortunately. And the Wildcats have had talent that they just weren't able to make most of when he wasn't on the field.
What about the rest of you guys? Have you guys seen any of Skylar Thompson at all?
I want to say real quick, speaking of a lot to like, Ryan, I love that sweatshirt. I love bubbles. I love that. I love that font. That is pristine. But go ahead.
I want the old badge back. I'd love for us to go back to logo.
Yeah.
Skylar Thompson, boys, anyone seen anything from him?
I've seen approximately 0 snaps of Skylar Thompson, so either we go deep into Ryan's fashion sense instead. No, I've got nothing to add on Skylar, I'm afraid.
So I kind of watched some highlights from him before, and I mean, the highlights, obviously, you're not going to see very much apart from the good that you've seen, but in him, I saw someone that I thought, oh, this is like a solid dual threat guy who can kind of evade people in the pocket, who can be a rushing threat. There was a lot of kind of zone read stuff that I saw where he was kind of punching it in. But then he runs a 4.91, and at that weight, you've kind of got to go, well, that's just not going to work for you at the next level. So if you take away that running ability, because you can't do that running a 4.91 as a quarterback, like that's not going to work. Has he got the arm to do it? And he's got a good arm. Like he is all touch and no cannon. So you're looking at like someone who, you know, if the stars align and he hits the absolute best player that he can ever be, he will be a poor man's Alex Smith. Like someone who just doesn't push it down the field but has got a fantastic touch pass 20 yards deep. And that, you know, that could operate an offense pretty nicely, actually. If you've got a horizontal offense, if you've got a West Coast team, that could be pretty nice. But I don't think, for me, he's someone that the Lions should be looking at even late. I didn't see enough from him that kind of made me think this guy can come in for you in relief for a minor injury and kind of shepherd you through the game. I didn't see that from him. Anyone else?
He's had a really bad season in regards to injuries. So I think, yeah, that's what I find. He's not maybe run as quick. He was having a really good year up until he got injured. And that Kansas State team have been fairly decent for the most part. So but he's on that group where he's undrafted. Someone might give him a chance. And, you know, if he stays healthy, he might be able to become a career backup if he tries hard. But just need someone to take a chance on him. But yeah, it's not us.
All right, Ryan, we'll move on to your final guy. Bumping this one up. We are kind of doing it in reverse order of interest, but we'll bump this one up just for you. Sam Howell out of UNC. What did you see from him? Presumptive number 2 overall pick coming into the season.
I still got a lot of interest in Sam Howell, the UNC Tar Heel product. Roughly 6'1", 100 kg. He'll be 22 in September. 3-year starter from 19 to 2021, roughly 11,000 plus yards, 92 touchdowns and 23 interceptions. And this year alone, he had 183 rushing attempts for 828 yards and 11 touchdowns. That's because his O-line folded quicker than a deck chair on the Whitby coast in the bad wind, because he got no help behind a terrible offensive line, unfortunately. So I've seen a lot of him though. Like I said, I've watched a lot of games this year. The Florida State game was one of them as well. And the Miami really impressed him. First thing I want to know is he's super tough. He got hit so many times this year. He was flushed out the pocket. Those runs weren't all designed. He had to run for his life sometimes. And he played through multiple knocks and injuries. Saw a little bit of Stafford in him in that sense. He's a stocky little guy. He's quite muscly as well, so he's got a good, strong physique there. When you see him rush, there's a nice balance to him. Like I say, before this year, he's never been a rusher. He'd only had like 250 yards rushing, but he's quite sneaky and deceptive. Like I say, he knows when the ball's not there, tucks it, hits a hole, and he's got a good low center of gravity, being just over 6 foot as well. So he can make a person miss, and he's got a foot race to get to the end zone. So he had a really good year on the ground, and that elevated him for me here. Cannon arm, like I say, I've seen him drop multiple bombs into the likes of Josh Downs and Corral as his tight end. 50, 60, 70 yards. He can put it on there, and the velocity is incredibly fast. when he fires it out when they're over the middle or the running back come out, like say, he puts heat on that ball. He looks a bit like a baseball pitcher. He gets the snap, like say, he doesn't mess about with it at all. He gets his eyes up, goes through his progressions, and he puts touch on it, but he fires it in when he has to. And the thing I love is that he hits guys in stride. Like say, he doesn't shy away from those smaller windows where you could get an interception if it's undercut. He puts the ball in where it needs to be. He hits the man where it needs to be in his hands, and then he lets them do the yards after catch there. So for me, he's a phenomenal passer. Like I say, he's had really good rushing numbers this year. He's played through some knocks and shown a lot of toughness. So I'm really high on him. I think he's a really good to great quarterback that's been on a fairly poor team that's really struggled in the SEC for a number of years. And I think he's going to go in that like 20 to 40 range. If he's on the board at 34, I am sprinting to the podium. I will honestly take him because I do see little bits of Stafford in him. He does take the odd risk. I have seen him throw into double coverage or try to force a ball in deep that wasn't there and it gets taken back the other way, which for sometimes him could put the brakes on a little bit more, but he's a true competitor and he's a proper gritty little guy. So I love everything about him.
Ryan, how about you? What do you reckon on Sam Howell?
I think there's a lot. Excuse me. Ryan mentions there's a little bit of Stafford to his game, and I agree with him in the sense that he's a very attacking quarterback. Like he wants to get the ball downfield. He wants to push it downfield. He has the arm talent to do it. He reminds me, like he has shades of Russell Wilson to his game. Like I think that he's built very similar to him. I think he has that escapability in the pocket. As Ryan mentioned, he was really struggling with that North Carolina offensive line that was ahead of him. I think that it was something like, let me see the stat here. Yeah, 12.2% sack rate, which is like a historically awful number, right? Like that's just somebody who was also trying to do like way too much. And that's kind of been the knock on Russell Wilson too. Like at the pro level is Russell Wilson gets sacked a lot. Yes, it's partially, the Seattle offensive line that struggled, but at the same time, sacks are a quarterback stat too. And I think that Sam Howell tries to extend plays a little bit too much when he scrambles, but how can you really fault the guy with the offensive line he was playing behind? He lost a lot of his playmakers in Diami Brown and Daz Newsome. Those guys all went to the NFL a year ago, and he was, stuck trying to, pull up this team that he had around him. So I like Sam Howell. I'm not sure if I'm crazy about any quarterback at 32, but if he slips through the cracks and, if he's there, late second round, if the Lions want to do some maneuvering and move up and grab a quarterback, if he's their guy on their board at that point, I wouldn't hate it.
Opening up to the floor, what have you seen from Sam?
I mean, I'm with Ryan. We've been pretty consistent in our defense of him this season. I think the overreaction to that first game he played in it's one of the biggest overreactions I've seen to a player ever. That he was number 2. He was a number 2 rated pick at the start of this year. He has one bad game, and all of a sudden he's forgotten about. But he was in such a bad team last year. He lost all his playmakers, like it's been said. His offensive line was trash, to put it for want of a better word. He was running for his life most of the season. He's got the toughness, he's got all the capabilities and the weapons you need at the next level. And I'm with Ryan. If he sat there at 32 or 35, I want defensive picks all along the way, but I couldn't say no to him. If we took him, I'd be secretly delighted, because I think he's been marginalized that much by that one performance that someone's going to get a steal with him. I think he should be a lot higher. I think he potentially could be a lot higher.
It really feels like people want to take him as an FU to the people who don't like him, rather than taking him on his merits, or not solely.
No, he's
just
a great player. He's a great player. And he got entirely too much criticism for that first game, which was absolutely not justified.
Yeah, it was an overreaction for sure.
Because I wasn't big on him before then, but as the season went on, he got better. He found new playmakers. He made new stars. And they had a decent year in parts, but the defense was awful. It was just a bad team that lost a lot of its core last year, and he still managed to play well. So I could not say no to him.
There's a lot of people that keep calling him Baker Mayfield, and it's very easy, but it's a bit lazy. Like I say, he's not Baker Mayfield. I think he's a little bit tougher and maybe a little more athletic when he takes off as well.
Steve, Tom?
I think it is interesting exactly what you say there, Ant, about the overreaction early, because I see a lot of issues is too strong a word, but questions about his game, similar to a guy we're going to get to later at Liberty, who also had bad games, but no one actually talks about those. So I think it is interesting, and the overreaction because of where he came in obviously dropped him way down, and we don't quite talk about him in the same way other players. That being said, accuracy, anticipation, progressions, the fact he did bail out because of that line and the lesser supporting cast, these are all things we saw out of Willis too, but I think we see them with Howell as well. And that concerns me a bit more. I expected to see a little bit more polish when I went back and watched. And because he doesn't have that same athletic upside as someone like Willis, who we'll get to, he does concern me a bit more. I was hoping when we got to the Senior Bowl down in Mobile, he was really going to step up. And I was a little underwhelmed, to be honest. So I may be a bit lower on him.
Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we were like 0-8 and we were like in full tank mode, the Howell hype train was gathering momentum, and I get frustrated with these like lame sort of club names like Tank for Trevor. So I came up with Throw in the Towel for Howell, which I think is like inspired, and then it just died. Like it just all died. So I've got a lot of regrets for that. I don't think I can add much more than Ryan and Ant have said. I think he's probably more accurate than Baker Mayfield. And I'd just be horrified that the Lions taken someone like him at 32 when we've got, we've just been talking about the defense and all of the needs that we've got at linebacker, at safety. I just can't see the value in investing in a pick at 32 or 34, or maybe even at the end of the second round for someone like Howell, who, he's got a huge arm, but there's so many flaws, and he would probably need to sit for at least a year. It just doesn't feel like the right move for me.
Yeah, I don't think he's a year one starter. So I think that the offense in North Carolina really hampered him all the way through his career, because I think that it is a pretty simple offense most of the time, especially when he had all those elite receivers a couple of years ago. It was a lot of go balls because his receivers were just so good. Why would you not throw over the top? And in doing so, he didn't actually show a lot of a variety of throws, and it wasn't really a kind of pro-ready offense that he was operating in. Now, getting rid of those guys and actually being forced to do something a bit different this year, for me, has actually shown that he has a bit more to his game than I thought he had. So, despite the fact that he played worse, I'm more encouraged this year than I was last year with Sam. The problem is that I perhaps didn't see quite enough to say he's definitely going to be able to get this to the next level. I worry that his ceiling is struggling starter, much like maybe people regarded the sort of Jared Goff level before the start of this year. I kind of worry that that's maybe, not in terms of style, but just in terms of perception. Like, I worry that that's his ceiling, and he's just not going to get any better. And the sort of mobility that he showed this year, which kind of came out of nowhere, isn't going to be a factor at the next level, because he just even though he's going to run like I think he ran a 4.65 or something like that, and that's fast for a quarterback. It's not fast enough to escape the elite edge rushers in the NFL. So, sorry, but you aren't running away from these guys. So, you've got to do it with your arm. He can. Can he do it consistently? Can he get beyond his first read consistently, which he did a bit of? But I don't know, I struggle with him. If you can get him for a third, I'm jumping on that. But at 34, 32, I think it's rich for me. And I think actually that's going to be a theme with a lot of these guys, is I think it's rich. I'm way down on this class, generally. I'm fine with taking a chance on any of them, but there we go. Right,
that's fair enough.
Any blowback? Any further follow-up on Sam? Because I know he's one of these guys who's kind of, he's PFF's number 1 quarterback. He's some guys number 5, number 6. So, and it kind of feels like the quarterback class is all over the place at the top here. So,
I think that's I think that speaks to the entire class, though, right, Matthew? Like, if you look at the whole class, there really isn't a hierarchy to it. it seems like everybody's all over the place with their quarterback rankings. I mean, like you said, you go to Pro Football Focus and Sam Howell's their number one quarterback. You go to the Ringer and Danny Kelly, he's the last of the, top tier quarterbacks, and they're kind of just all over the place. I know somebody that we talked to quite a bit, Brett Whitefield, who used to work for Pro Football Focus. He's pretty high on Sam Howell. He's right there. He's below Malik Willis, but I think that Brett would be on board with Sam Howell at 32 or 34 for a lot of the reasons, Ryan spoke about, and even Anthony to some respect. He has, and he's 21. So, I mean, he has room to grow. He has room to develop. But I agree with you, Matthew. I don't think that he comes in, he shouldn't be put into a place where he needs to start immediately. And I think with the Lions specifically, if you want to showcase Sam Howell, you want to get the ball down the field and you want to attack vertically a lot. And I'm not so sure if the Lions want to do that all the time.
Well, I guess it depends where some other premier talent does and how DJ Chark does and whether we can re-sign him. We have so little invested in wide receiver that we can pretty much go anywhere in 2023. So we shall see. Right, let's move on to our third guy, going back down into day 3 or priority UDFAs. Ant's first guy from Alabama A&M is Akil Glass. What did you see from him?
Oh, it's me. Oh, hang on. Sorry. Got my notes there. I thought someone was before me, then I realised Ryan's was before me.
I've got to shoot, guys, anyway, so.
That's cool. Cheers, Ryan.
See you later, guys. Have a nice night, Ryan. Bye.
Take it easy, Ryan. So Akil Glass. So I specifically asked for these guys in the later rounds of the draft because we've been keeping an eye on them for some time now. And outside of the Sam Howell talk, I've said that, maybe we should go Howell high, but for the most part, I've really been of the opinion that we need to go for a development guy this year. Goff is going to be here for the next year. I think he's going to be the starter. That's undeniable. But it doesn't mean that we can't start to facilitate maybe a transfer of power, or just have a go in the later rounds, and then maybe go for a big guy next year if it doesn't work out. And I think that this draft, everyone talks about how bad the top of the class is, but I think there's some underrated gems to be found in the later rounds. So like I say, I specifically asked for these guys. Just say the first one, Akil Glass. He's the quarterback from Alabama A&M. He's been there for 5 years. They play in the FCS and the SWAC. That's the Southwestern Athletic Conference. The FCS is the second division of college football, like where Trey Lance came from last year. Akil Glass, he's 6'4", he's 230 pounds, got a really good frame for an NFL quarterback. However, history is against him when it comes to guys coming from where he does in the draft. So if anyone who doesn't know, if you've been listening to the college podcast that we do, we've taken a look at the HBCU scene for a while. That's the higher black college and university scene. It's an area where a lot of schools come from. And a lot of the players there have not really had opportunities in the draft in recent years, but there's some really good talent coming out this year. We took an eye on it on the college podcast. We focused on the legacy game. We focused on the combine. And this was one of the guys who really stood out early for me. The last time a HBCU quarterback, by the way, was taken in the draft, we're going back to 2006. Vikings took one in round 3. So it's not something you come across often, but it's trying to find the diamonds in the rough, find the exceptions to the rule. And I do really like this guy. So over his career, he's thrown 923 passes out of 1,573 attempts. That's a 57% completion rating. He's got 12,136 passing yards, 109 touchdowns, 41 interceptions, a passer rating of 148.7. That's gone up year on year. And he's also got 4 rushing touchdowns as well. Not really a dual threat guy, but he doesn't need to be. So as I say, he's spent 5 years as a starter there, which automatically makes him one of the most experienced quarterbacks that you've got coming up in this draft. He helped lead Alabama A&M to their first SWAC title in over 15 years. He's really gone there and had a good effect on this franchise. But it wasn't all plain sailing for him. He struggled badly as a freshman. He had the wrong coach, came in at the wrong time. The team wasn't very good. But then, luckily for him, his fortunes changed. They had a new head coach go there. He goes by the name of Connell Maynor. So he's a 20-year veteran of the NFL scene, played in the AFL there as well. Also a HBCU quarterback, someone who's been a real good role model for him there, and he's really flourished under his leadership. So as a player, he's got the physical build, like I say, 6'4", 230 for what you want, and he's also got the arm strength required to play in the NFL. He can make throws outside the numbers. He can do the downfield throws with ease. He gets the zip on his passes. He can put really lovely passes into tight coverage. It's one of the things that steps out about him when you first look at some of his tape there. But the crown jewel of his game is his decision making. So he has an innate ability to protect the ball against turnovers. Obviously, in 5 years, only 41 there. It's about 9 a year. Compared to some of these guys, they do throw a lot of picks. But when it comes to throwing the ball, he puts it in areas where only the receivers can really get at it. He minimizes the chances of a defender trying to take a pick away from there or anything like that. If the passes aren't good, they're incomplete. They're not really turnovers from that point of view there. The progression reading is something that's improved from him over the years. You can see him going through the reads. He's got a very good eye when it comes to reading defensive backs, being able to manipulate the back of the field there, which helps him select the right pass to make. Again, something over the years that you can see he definitely gets better with. The pocket awareness as well is really good from him. He's not the most mobile guy, not at his size, but he doesn't need to be. He's got a keen ability to sense the collapsing pocket. And when he's, so where are we? The thorough read of the field, he can step up, he can make the throws under pressure. So he's not a guy who's going to panic. He's not a guy who's going to make errant throws and just give it away. He's very sensible when it comes to that. And also with his build, it means he's very good at withstanding contact in the pocket. He can shrug off the challenges. He can get out from danger if he needs to. He can roll out and throw it. It's not something you want him doing very often. You do want him to work from a bit of a cleaner pocket, but he is able to scramble if he needs to do so. So there's a lot of good to like about his game and a lot that you can develop with him. But as with everybody coming out of college, there are bad sides to the game as well. And his is his lower body mechanics. He's got some real work to do with these. He's got a really inconsistent plant technique with his feet. It affects the accuracy of his throwing. Obviously, it's only 58% in college, which isn't the greatest completion rating in the world. And if he's under serious pressure, he's one of those who'll start throwing off his back leg. It means his passes lose a lot of juice. Sometimes they do fall short, are prone to interception if he's put under a lot of pressure there. So all it means really is the throwing is quite inconsistent. He has shown that he can make the elite throws when he wants to, but more often than not, the feet do have a say in it, which isn't the greatest thing in the world for him. But crucially, it's something that you can work on. I think overall, you've got the intangibles to work with. You've got the size. You've got the strength that you need with him there. It's just some mechanical issues to work with. And he's got the IQ as well to play the game. And I really want to see this QB room freshened up. I want to see a guy come in and be able to challenge Blau and Boyle, because quite frankly, I'm fed up of the pair of them now. And I think there's a real opportunity for a rookie to come in and have a go. And I think if you can get this guy's technique sorted, then you're going to have a guy who can potentially challenge sooner rather than later. Like I say, he's coming out of small school, but that doesn't mean you should sleep on him. I really like this guy.
Yeah, I watched a bit of tape of his before we came on air, actually, and I came away pretty impressed with, and in agreement with a lot of what you said. He was able to make very accurate throws when given a kind of clean pocket, or if he kind of was escaping on his own terms, he seemed to be able to, do very well on the front foot. He's able to kind of get it in there. I thought he had quite nice touch, even though it's listed in a couple of draft reviews that he didn't have great touch. I completely disagree and thought he had pretty good touch and able to kind of, as you say, get the ball to places where only his receivers can get it. I think for him, his biggest problem is just inconsistency. Like you say, when he's pressured, when he gets on his back leg, I think he finds it difficult. And it's just one of those things that the thing is, I want to say he needs more experience, he needs more reps. The problem is he's been there 5 years, as you say, and how many more reps does he need to get comfortable with this sort of thing? I don't know for sure, but I've got to be convinced that A&M don't perhaps have the best offensive line in the world, and you are going to face pressure in the NFL. So I don't know whether that just massively limits what he's going to be able to do. Have you guys
You can see the progression already because, I mean, he took part in the NFLPA collegiate game not long after the season ended. He went 9 of 11 for 141 yards and a touchdown, and you could already see that with coaching, because I know he's hired a specialist to help him with the footwork. He was already looking a lot better than what he was in the season there. And in terms of us, we are actually quite a spot we can land for him because, one, you don't need him to challenge instantly. He can come in, he can get these mechanics worked on and develop at his pace. But even if you do need him to come in eventually, this is a guy who thrives when he's in a pocket, which is kept free of pressure. And when we have our starting offensive line out there, there's very few better places to be able to go than to give him the time he needs to use his arm strength, which is his big weapon. He just needs to sort out those feet, but there's absolutely no reason otherwise that he can't. He's had a really solid offseason. His pro day was really good. I know we were there at his pro day, one of a few teams that were. The Lions have taken a real interest in the HBCU scene this offseason, and it really wouldn't surprise me to see 1 or 2 players come from there, especially with the draft picks as well. So I can already see the progression there with him. I think I didn't use this comp as a big thing, but he's like in the style of Philip Rivers in that he's not going to run everywhere, but he uses his IQ to do all his damage in the pocket, and he's very good at sensing when pressure's coming, getting rid and keeping the turnovers down. So he's in that mold. If you just need to develop him right and get those feet sorted, he'll be well on his way. I would be really interested in us going after him later on and challenging these two behind Goff because they need it, quite frankly.
There's a reason all these guys are developmental, right? I guess my challenge with Glass is you touch on the mechanics and the accuracy issues that come out of that, but he is a really poor performing athlete. So if you combine someone who has mechanical issues, accuracy issues, and then can't escape anything, that's a concern to me. I mean, I'm just scanning down his RAS score now, and if it wasn't for his size, it might be an all-time worst score at the QB position. 40-yard dash, 0.17, 20-yard split, 0.83, vertical, 0.22, broad, 0.63. It's all 0. Something. And I completely understand your point that his game isn't to run around people, obviously, and you wouldn't be asking him to do that. I'm just reluctant in the modern game to take guys that are statues unless they can showcase really elite traits elsewhere. And I would rather gamble a developmental guy on someone who shows elite traits and then hope that some of the other stuff you can fix. I'm just not sure he has it.
Well, I've got one for you next then, so.
Ryan, Steve?
I mean, again, I think Ant's pretty much done a good job of, trying to sell this guy as a developmental. Can't even say the word. Developmental. Can't say it. As a promising QB.
We need an English teacher.
Am I having a stroke? What's going on here?
We don't want to know, please.
But yeah, I mean, I just keep thinking Kellen Mond. Like, that's just going through my head. And again, it just feels like a luxury that the Lions can't afford. I mean, do you think he'll be around in sort of 6th or 7th round, Ant?
Oh, these are all late. These are day 3 guys. I'm not selling anything more than that. That's the whole reason. He is a small school guy coming from traditionally a scene which doesn't produce many, no players were drafted from there last year at all. But it's all about trying to find the developmental talent and the traits to work with. And that's what I quite like with him.
Yeah. So there are priority UDFAs and there are UDFAs. I think Glass is a UDFA, but he's a player, he's a prospect that I think might entice a few teams, right? Just based on the intangibles, like Anthony mentioned. Like, I mean, the size. He's 6'5". He fits the mold. He fits the frame of that quarterback that everybody's after in terms of like the Josh Allen, right? But there's a lot of stuff to clean up. So I think that's where he fits. Hopefully he finds a home somewhere on a practice squad and he can work on his game.
All right, let's move on to our 4th guy. From Western Kentucky, Tom is taking on someone that we had, I think, at the Senior Bowl, Bailey Zappy.
Yeah, we did indeed. So Bailey Zappy, Western Kentucky, he's 6'1", 215 pounds, which you'll find is a running theme through a number of these quarterbacks. Played his final year at Western Kentucky, but actually transferred from Houston Baptist before then. So last year, threw an FBS single season record, 5,940 yards, completion percentage of 68.7%. He had 62 touchdowns with 11 interceptions, passer rating of 118.5. So he's not lacking stats, that we can confirm. PFF grade of 87.8 last year. And the previous 2 years, he had grades of 84.0 and 90.7. So he's always been graded out well. And athleticism-wise, relatively average across the board, not necessarily a bad thing then. So in terms of strengths, it's hard to ignore the record-breaking career, and he's performed really everywhere he's been. So even when he hasn't been starting, when he's got reps, he has delivered. He's delivered stats, he's delivered touchdowns, and he's had a high volume of this really the whole way through. But he's also had low turnover numbers too. So in terms of if you're just kind of reading off the box score, so to speak, there is a lot to be impressed by in what he's done throughout his career. Pre-snap, he's in control. He understands defensive schemes, coverages, etc. And we'll come on to some of his projection, let's say, but obviously that could help him in a QB2, QB3 role. Accuracy is good in general. I think that's shown by the low turnover numbers. He does show some inconsistency though. I think when I knew of him then coming into the Senior Bowl, I was expecting this perfectly accurate guy, which isn't necessarily what comes across. Really nice touch passer. He shows a really fantastic ability to throw with anticipation. It's really as good as anyone in this class, to be honest, in terms of how he anticipates and throws guys open. There's a concern, which we'll get to on his arm strength, as to how that will translate. But at the college level, it was really, really impressive. Ball placement on deep ball is excellent. He's not going to be throwing it 70 yards downfield, but he throws a nice deep ball. And whilst he doesn't have above average arm strength by any means, I was expecting some guy who has just had a pea shooter for an arm. And that's not really the case. I think it's probably below average, but it's not as disastrous as maybe I was expecting it to be going into it. So on the downsides, I do worry about his ability to make NFL throws. So yes, he doesn't have a disastrous arm, but this is the NFL, right? We need you to have an above average arm, and he just doesn't have that. So when you combine that with someone who does need to stay on platform, think of him almost as the anti-Stafford in that regard. You're not going to see lots of funny arm angles. You're not going to see him kind of throwing off his back foot and throwing with accuracy. If he doesn't set his feet, if he does throw off his back foot, it's all over the place. He does make more mistakes than I think his numbers suggest. So obviously historic career, but when you go a little deeper and watch some of the film, I actually saw quite a few mistakes, if I'm honest. And I think that actually came up on the Senior Bowl too, and that he wasn't, not that anyone was expecting a perfect prospect, but I think there were more inconsistencies than maybe people expected going in. He worked out of a very clean pocket at Western Kentucky as well. When you saw him get to the Senior Bowl, get pressured, especially when he actually took the game reps, it showed up a bit. He can hold on to the ball. And when he does get forced outside the pocket, he just doesn't really have that ability to make plays on the run. We touched on the anticipation. I think he's going to need time to adjust to NFL athletes, and it's going to take a while because, yes, he is great at throwing guys open. He's not going to be able to do that with his arm at the NFL level against NFL athletes. They're going to close windows. And I think as a result, early in his career, he could well get gun shy because he's going to see passes get picked that he wasn't used to seeing get picked. And then he's going to hold on to the ball even further, and it's going to become a self-fulfilling cycle. So there's a few things like that which concern me about how he's going to translate. He has an annoying habit of patting the ball as well in terms of when he's going to release it, which a few guys do in this class. Sam Howell's another one, drives me mad. But yeah, there are a number of concerns. And I think just in terms of final thoughts, when we talk about QB prospect, when we talk about any prospect, we always talk about traits. And I think it's really not true at any position than the QB position of what traits are going to translate to the NFL, given the importance of that position. For me, he lacks really any elite traits to succeed at the position long term. He's nicely rounded, but I don't see anything that's going to make him a standout starter. As a result, like I say, I don't think he's going to be someone who walks in and takes a job and starts. However, because of his success, because of his smarts, which do come across in terms of how he reads coverages, some of that anticipatory stuff as well, he could be a solid backup. I think he's a guy that you would want to have in your QB room. I just don't think he's going to be someone who's going to be pushing for starts.
Ryan, have you seen anything from Bailey?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers jump off the page, right? And I think Tom highlighted that at the top. When you talk about 62 touchdowns and all the yards he threw for, last season, it's something that kind of blows your mind. And then you have to start thinking about, like, okay, he played in like a shotgun only pass heavy offense that's like all predicated on empty sets and wide receiver screens. And he has light boxes, and he's just a quarterback who, Tom really hit on it. I mean, I think he did a phenomenal job kind of painting the picture of who Bailey Zappy is. I think he's the kind of guy who you don't mind coming in to salvage a football game. Like, he is very much like Case Keenum. He is very much like, I saw another comparison, like Nick Mullins. Like, this is a guy who maybe you can talk yourself into. Like, I think the Houston Texans are going to find out that they have this with Davis Mills. Like, this is a guy who, like, he can belong in your quarterback room, but he's certainly not going to be the kind of guy who you're going to, like, win football games because of. I think the arm strength is a question mark for sure. I think he has incredible touch on his throws, but I think he's a guy who he can be a part of your room, and you're not worse for it.
And Steve?
Yeah, I agree there. He's a product of the system he played in there. When you're playing air raid, when you've got receivers who are wide open all the time, not taking anything away from it, but it's a lot easier than what you're going to get at the NFL level. You're going to make a lot more contested throws. You're going to be under a lot more pressure. The CUSA is a weak conference. The level of opposition is not the highest, although, that's the same with some of these guys that you can only beat who is in front of you. But, these will be things you would take into account at the next level. Can he adapt to the way the NFL plays? Because the NFL doesn't play like Western Kentucky do at all. So he's going to have to learn all new schemes, learn how, he's going to have to adapt to it, adapt his throw, and adapt everything to his game really for the next level. So it's just, can you trust him to do so? I mean, he deserves a chance because he's had hell of a year, and you would expect he might be able to, but there's a lot to adjust before you're going to get a starter out of him.
I mean, first of all, I just want to get through this piece without having to say developmental again.
You nailed it.
Absolutely. For me, this goes back to the conversation that I think that Ryan was brought up around David Blau and Tim Boyle. So for me, in terms of the QB room, Tim Boyle is not someone who is going to get on the field unless Goff goes down. And when Boyle does come on the field, I just have zero confidence. And unless we're already like 14 points up in the game, I've got zero confidence that Boyle's the guy that's going to get the win. And I guess the question is, someone like Bailey Zapp, is that the guy, if you've got nothing to lose, if you're not going to win the game anyway, is this when you would put him in rather than Boyle or say Blau? And it seems like with someone like Zapp, that could be the case, because like I said, you've got nothing to lose. You're just developing a guy and you're giving him experience, and you're swinging, and you might hit a home run with him, particularly in a late round. So I guess that's the argument for taking a risk on this kind of guy.
And Ash is just saying he's worried that you got no Davis Mills clapback to Ryan. So.
Oh no, it's all right. That's fine. I'm just going to leave it as this. I highlighted Davis Mills as the guy last year, and he's come in and done really well. I was right. So I think he could be an NFL starter. I from his pro day and everything, you could just see the traits of a good NFL quarterback there. And obviously he's been thrown in the deep end, but he's done well on an incredibly bad Houston team. if they're able to protect him a little more, give him more of a shot there, then I think he's got all the potential that I thought he was capable of there. But you get lucky with these. For every one that you say is going to be good, there's 50 who I can think of who are just like, no, they're absolutely terrible now. So we like to live with our ones that we think we got a little right. But he's still got a lot to prove. I'm not going to wave the flag on him yet and go, yeah, I was right, he's great. But I'm just glad that he got the opportunity, and I'm glad that hopefully they're going to roll with him and give him an opportunity there, because he's very gifted at Stanford. He had a good off season last year, did well, and he's got a good chance. That's all you can ask for with him. And then they got him later on, so the guys are there to be found if you look hard enough.
Ash is now saying something about some Florida State quarterback who's irrelevant, so I won't even give it the time of day. But we'll move on.
He wouldn't be top 15 in this draft. So
no, we can't talk about whoever that guy is. But we will move on and to your second guy, a guy from a college who hasn't had an NFL player drafted since 2010. I found out in my research this morning. EJ Perry from Brown. What have you seen from him?
Yeah, so the theory of what I've had with the guys that I've picked is I'm looking developmental on day 3 picks, UDFAs, but guys who potentially have a lot of upside to them. And EJ Perry's a name that really it came out of left field for me. I only first heard about him when the East-West Shrine Bowl came around, but I'll get to that in a second. So yeah, he's quarterback of the Brown Bears, or was. He was there for 3 years. They play in the Ivy League, again, FCS team there. Standard of competition, maybe not the highest in the world, but he was on an incredibly bad side. They're not been good at all outside of him. He's 6'2", 210 pounds. So again, decent frame for the game, not on the short side. A lot to work with there. Over his career, he's had 2 years altogether because the Ivy League didn't play in 2020. They lost a year to it. He's 545 of 861 passes. It's a 63.3% completion rate, 5,972 passing yards, 45 touchdowns, 27 interceptions, 1,029 rushing yards, 15 rushing touchdowns. He's also got a receiving touchdown as well. He's done a little bit of everything. He was a transfer out of Boston College. He was trying to get the starting job there, but he got beaten out. So fair play to him. He went in the portal. He went elsewhere. His uncle actually became head coach of Brown. So he went there, got his opportunity, and he took it. But like Akil Glass, he's coming from a system that doesn't have a lot of history when it comes to the draft. And the odds are stacked against him. There's only one Ivy League quarterback that's been drafted since 1984. We all know him because he's got the best beard in the NFL and he's one of the most beloved journeyman quarterbacks of all time and has ended up having a pretty decent career. And we know him because he's from Harvard. Obviously, Ryan Fitzpatrick shares my last name, so going to love him for that one. Like you said, he's going to be the first player drafted there in a long time, because I think he is. Quarterback-wise, they've only ever had one quarterback drafted. That was like in the 70s. He never threw a pass in the NFL, so he will be the first Brown quarterback to throw a pass in the NFL if he does so. But like I say, he's come right out of the left field. No one was really talking about him that long ago, but it's because he's had such a stellar postseason run, because he's come from somewhere, again, that does not get a lot of attention. So he's had to take his chance in the offseason, and really he has done. It started with the East-West Shrine Bowl, which is one of the all-star games after the season's gone. He got an MVP performance in that game there. He threw 13 of 18 for 241 yards, 3 touchdowns. He then followed it up with one of the best combines there. Tom, you wanted athleticism. He was the most athletically gifted quarterback at this combine. He had a 685 3-cone, a 418 20-yard shuttle that led all QBs at the combine. He had a 465 in the 40, second only to Desmond Ridder. He had a 34.5 vertical jump, a 10'3" broad jump. That was second best among all the QBs there. Put simply, he had the best athletic profile of any quarterback coming out of the combine. And then he topped it off with his pro day, which he did when he went to Holy Cross. I believe he did it with them. Where was he? So yeah, 47 of 49 passes he threw at his pro day, so only 2 that were wrong. Showcased every form of pass that you could get there and looked really good. And his draft stock has just been rising and rising and rising. So as for the player, like I say, his game is predicated on his athleticism. He is a legitimate dual threat quarterback. As you can see, he's into 4 figures for rushing yards in just 2 years. So you can scheme him as a runner. It opens up your playbook and just gives you that offense an extra dimension when your guy is able to do that. Like Akil Glass, the pocket awareness is a really big strength of his. He's got a real good feel for pressure, and unlike Glass, he's also got the athletic capabilities to escape a collapsing pocket, to extend the plays, to rescue busted plays there. That's something that Akil can't do, and it is something that he is able to do. He's also able to exploit the gaps, get positive gains in there. But don't worry, with a lot of these guys, when they are dual threat, a lot of them will be one read guys. They'll take one look at the read, they'll try and escape out the pocket. He doesn't do this. You will see him go through the full range of progressions at his disposal before he does decide to abandon the pocket. That's really critical going forward to the next level. He doesn't panic, looks through his reads, then decides what's best for him there. Obviously, you see a few examples of it, but it is really the exception to the norm, as we would say. When it comes to the passing, it's throwing with touch where he really excels. When he gets it right, he makes some absolutely beautiful passes. It's almost Aaron Rodgers-esque with sort of the weight and the placement of the ball he's able to. But when he gets it right, I'm not saying he is, but it's to that degree. There's plenty of times where you can see him sail it just over a defensive back, right into the arms of the receiver. It really is a great thing to watch when he's on form. But the thing the NFL is going to love most about him, what coaches and maybe a guy like Dan Campbell is going to love about him, he is a 110% effort, 100% of plays guy. This guy has a motor which never stops. Even if the game is gone, he plays like the game is on the line. You'll see him chase defenders down the field 30, 40 yards if the ball's turned over. When he's in the running game, he'll fight for extra yardage. I know that can be sort of a two-way thing where he might get injured, but you really want to see that effort and application for him there. And he leads the team by example. Whatever he can do to help on there, he will do it. And it's the sort of leadership that you're looking for when it comes to a quarterback going forward, especially if you're looking at a developmental guy. You want to see those traits there. But the one thing that really will stand out for him as well, the competitive toughness that he has, it gives him a special teams upside. So unlike Akil Glass, if you're going to bring him in and you're going to develop him, there's a place for him on special teams. The mentality, the speed he plays out, what he does, he's going to be able to help you there while you develop him. And that's, what all players coming into the team, all your late round developmental picks need to be able to do. And it's especially a good thing for a quarterback to be able to do that. You can, I hate to use them, but he's got like that Taysom Hill versatility about him where you can use him as a runner. He can come in and play a quarterback, and you can use him on special teams. You can sort of Swiss Army knife him a little bit while you're teaching him the ropes there. And obviously, I've said a lot of good things, there's bad things with all prospects there are, and there are a lot of things to work on with this guy. Turnovers it's really bad. He's had 22 interceptions in 16 career games, only 2 turnover-free games in his career. Obviously, not all of them are on him, but when you see some of them, there are enough where you go in the throws are like, oh my God, what was that, to concern you. Obviously, the decision making is there. He likes to go after those like low percentage throws when he maybe should be thinking a little bit differently about it. It is a mentality thing, but people have worked their way back from that before. It is something that can be developed and worked on. He's just got to get a little smarter when it comes to the throwing. And of course, he's going to be working with receivers who are a hell of a lot better at the next level than what he's had available to him at Brown. He does have some of the similar lower body issues, the mechanics issues as well, like Akil Glass. They're not as bad, but worthy of that. Again, they need working on. And that's what a lot of these late round developmental quarterbacks, that is a problem with a lot of them. It is the mechanics, the throwing mechanics you have to work on a little bit. But again, it's nothing that's not salvageable for a guy who you're taking on and you're developing long term. Obviously, you've got other things like the level of competition in the Ivy League, but said for a lot of quarterbacks, you can only face who's put in front of you. And for the most part, he's done quite well there for a school that traditionally does not really do well. And then people will also question his arm strength. Now, I just want to push back on this a little bit and say Brown don't play a system where they throw the ball deep a lot. So it's a case of they don't ask him to do it. It's not that he can't do it. And if you've seen him in the postseason, in the practices he's been doing, he's shown that he can throw the ball downfield. pretty accurately, but obviously he still has to prove this in a game day situation. So you kind of have to file it under one of those things you've got to watch, but it's a bit harsh to call it a problem for him at this point in time. So, having said that, overall, you take everything into account. He's another prospect I like, particularly because of the work ethic. And like I say, he wants to do anything he can to help the team. Any way he'll be able to get on the team, he will do it. If you develop him right, you get a guy who is going to be a multi-purpose weapon there. You get a special teamer straight off to be able to do work there with him, because that's a way you work your way in. I know Dan Campbell likes his guys to come in and earn their stripes through their special teams, and before moving them into the team themselves. Like, the comp I made for him out of this is Taylor Heineke, because Taylor Heineke came from Old Dominion, another small school guy. He was a punter there as well as the quarterback. He sort of made his thing in special teams. He does the quarterback things. He works incredibly hard to get where he wants to. And if you can have a similar sort of career trajectory to him, which I think is perfectly possible, with a 7th round pick, a UDFA pick, that's pretty good value for what you're getting. So again, this is a prospect I like. I see the base traits. It just needs development, but I think it's worth taking a gamble on if you're back there.
Have you guys seen anything of EJ Perry at all?
Absolutely nothing. Yeah, I mean, I think Anthony said that this is like 110% effort guy. I mean, I think Dan Campbell's base is 200%. So I'm not sure he's going to fly with the Lions. I mean, like, yeah, the Heineke, the thing is with these kind of guys, you look at Heineke, he comes in and, like, he really flashes for a couple of games and makes some throws. And I think he won a couple of games, but then, the defensive coordinators go to work and they just absolutely brutally, like, unpick all the flaws in their game. And then you see Heineke get absolutely crushed as the season goes on, and like, these guys have got more tape on him. But I mean, it sounds like an interesting guy. I actually knew about the Ryan Fitzpatrick thing because I read that book called Quarterback by John Feinstein, and there's like a whole chapter on Fitzmagic, who is like absolutely a crazy guy. He's got an economics degree from Harvard, and he's also got 7 children. So he's prolific in many ways.
Just on EJ Perry, did a little bit before we came on him, and I think the thing which distinguishes him from pretty much everyone outside the top 6 for me is when you're looking at quarterbacks, especially backup quarterbacks, you would like a way for that guy to win. Much as you kind of want at the elite level, you want something that they do really, really well, even if they're deficient in other areas. And Perry has that in terms of athleticism. So I'm going to throw out, the decision making, the kind of putting the ball in a harm's way, because maybe I'm just not going to ask him to do that. But if he comes in relief as a backup quarterback, and you are scheming together like a zone read, design quarterback run type scheme, I think that he can run that offense and actually provide a quite high floor. So in terms of everyone below, say, whoever your quarterback 6 is, I think a lot of people have Strong at quarterback 6, but it could be Corral or whoever. Below that, someone you're trying to take as a quarterback 2, I really like this guy because I can actually see a way I can win an NFL game with him. So I love it. You can fix the rest later, but I want to take this guy in the 7th if he's there, because I think he actually gives us something that we don't currently have. Anyone else?
Yeah, unfortunately, he's not going to be there because we've solved it. We now know why the Saints are moving up. They're getting Taysom Hill 2.0. He's going in the top 5.
Now you know damn well what I meant with that comparison, Tom. You know damn well.
All right, we'll move this on to the next one, and we're getting into some of the higher drafted picks now. So Carson Strong of Nevada is one of mine, and this is someone who's dividing a lot of opinion, I think, in this draft, because his stock has fallen a long way because he has a degenerative knee problem that's been a problem for him all the way through high school, all the way through his college career, and people are just worried about whether he's actually going to be on the field at the next level. But let's have a look into him as a player and then make our own decision about whether the injury history is a problem. But Carson Strong, quarterback from Nevada, played number 12. He's redshirt junior, 22 years old. He's going to turn 23 just at the start of the season. Doesn't have a RAS score because he wasn't able to perform. But he's just over 6'3", 226 pounds. He's played 32 games at Nevada, 852 of 1,251. That's 68% completion rate, 9,368 yards, 7.5 yards per average completion, 74 touchdowns to 19 interceptions. Accuracy, he's very, very, very good on his short to medium routes. He can make all the NFL throws that you'd like to see at that sort of level. So I'm talking maybe 20 yards down the field. He's proficient as you like. When it comes to deep ball, he has got potentially the best arm strength of any quarterback in this class. So you want him to throw it 70 yards down the field. He does it without looking like he's breaking sweat. This guy can throw the ball a long way, but his accuracy, when he gets that far deep, it's a bit iffy. And, if you're throwing 70 yards, maybe it should be a bit iffy, because that's a long bloody way. But, when you want to take a quarterback high, you maybe want to see a little bit better accuracy in his deep balls. But because he's got that in his arsenal, and because it seems so easy for him, they asked him to do it a lot. And that means that when you have a look at his highlights, if that's all you've seen, a lot of them will be deep balls, go balls, posts, where he's just able to put it on the money for a touchdown from his own 30 or 40. Like, he's exceptional at doing that. It's just, every now and again, he does overcook those sort of throws. Decision making, he makes his decisions really quickly, and he doesn't often put the ball in harm's way. There's a couple of instances on tape where he's throwing his double and triple coverage, but no more so than any of these college quarterbacks. And, I think I'm talking not just about this class, but I don't think his decision making is any worse than some of the elite talents that have been there in recent years. In terms of progressions, he's able to get through them. He really does get off his first and second reads really, really well, and he's able to make those decisions very, very quickly. When he sees something he likes, though, he locks on and holds onto the ball maybe a little bit too much, and so when he sees a guy win off the snap, he'll almost give the secondary a chance to make a play. It's really bizarre, but when you see a guy get a step, I kind of worry that Carson Strong's going to put the ball in harm's way more than he should. So that's something that's very, very coachable. I don't think that's anything that's going to be a problem long term. In terms of his release, it's an odd throwing motion. And maybe that helps him with his depth of throw, but he tends to get over the ball, like a lot. Like he's trying really, really hard to get the tight spiral more than some of these guys. It's just something that I don't think is particularly consistent. I do think it means that his release takes a little bit more time than some of these guys. And when you come onto his mobility, all you hear about Carson Strong is that this guy is a statue. He cannot move in the pocket. So when his release is a little bit slower, that's worrying. I don't like that. I think he needs to work on maybe changing his release point so that he can throw it a bit quicker, because it is true, he's not the most mobile guy in the world. Having said that, when I looked at his mobility in the pocket, he's able to manipulate it quite well. I kind of saw a little bit of like college Tom Brady to him in terms of like, okay, fine, you don't want him to run 4 steps, but if you're asking him to take a step to the right to buy him a second, he can do that. So I don't think it's a massive issue at the NFL level, because he can do just about enough as long as everything else is there. And yet, in a couple of games that I've seen, so I watched Kansas State and Idaho State from 2021, there are multiple instances of him rushing for 10, 15 yards down the field when the defense give that to him, which is really weird for someone who's very, very slow. Like, if the guy ran in the 40, I think it might be like a 5.4. Like, he's so slow. But if the defense give it to him, he does it. And he slides, and, is very efficient. So he's slow, but he's not shy. And I quite like that about him. He's the leader of that offense. It goes out 5 wide as their base offense. And sometimes you'll see them with 4 wide receivers and a running back. But more often than not, 5 wide receivers kind of quickly identifying pre-snap what he's going to do. and he throws that. So it's a sort of bit air raidy, and his team was one of the better in that division, so that really helped him in offense. But he's intelligent, even when he's in that sort of offense. He is the guy calling out the protections. He's identifying the mic. He's adjusting things based on pre-snap reads. So even with the limitations of it not being massively a pro-ready offense, I saw things that are going to translate. So for me, this is a guy without the injury history that I would be putting right up there in his quarterback class. I'd have him in my top 2, probably, and maybe not 2. I really, really liked what he did. But with the knee injury and the problems that he's had, I do not know whether he will have an NFL career. Like, I really worry that he'll take a few hits and that'll be him done. And so for me, that's taking him out of first round consideration fairly comfortably. I know there was a draft, actually, mock draft from someone prominent that had him coming to the lines at 32, and like, oh, okay, really? I mean, it's a risk that we could take, and the upside is huge. But get it wrong, you've burnt the pick in a really, really bad way. So he's often mocked in the 3rd. I think that's fair to take a flyer on someone who's got these traits but has a massive downside. That's Carson Strong for me, boys. Have you guys seen anything of him? I know, Ant, you've seen a lot of Nevada. You especially like Romeo Dubs, I know, the wide receiver. So what have you seen from Strong?
I really like Carson Strong. I just need to put an asterisk on a lot of this. Carson Strong should not have played football last year. His doctor told him not to play. His dad told him not to play. He needed his knee to heal up, and he made the decision to go back for his teammates and play football. And as a result, the offense had to adjust to his injury. So a lot of the problems that you're seeing, his footwork, his planting when he's going for the long throws, these are a direct result of him playing injured and are not necessarily a representation of Carson Strong, the quarterback, when he's fully healthy. Now, I'll make no bones about this. If you draft him, you're redshirting him. You have to redshirt him. He's had the operation on his knees. He just needs to let it heal. So you take him and you sit him a year, and then in 12 months, when his knee is fully healed, you will get the real Carson Strong who's coming out, the guy who has a gun of an arm, the guy who, he's not the most mobile in the world, but he is good at feeling out pressure in the pocket. He can look after himself. He can take a hit and still throw the ball. So, I don't disagree with a lot of Matt said there. There are issues in there, but a lot of it has been caused by his injury. But you have to take that mentality into account. He went back for his teammates. He didn't quit on them. He didn't take the time off there. He went back, he played, he found a way to play, and they still had a pretty decent season, all things considered. So, I'm still high on him. If he's there in round 3, I know I said I don't really want a quarterback, and I've said I'd have all these guys so far, but in a world, if you take him with the comp pick there, I'm not going to complain, but you are sitting him, and you're going to wait 12 months until you start to see returns on him there. There's a really good film breakdown on YouTube. Matt Waldman, who does it, the RSP Room, they're really good with their quarterback breakdowns. I recommend you go and watch that. And you'll see a lot of the good and the bad that he does, but I think it might change the opinion on him there a little. But he played hurt when he shouldn't have played, so you have to take it with a grain of salt, some of the bad from this year.
For me personally, I think Carson Strong cannot even be on your draft board. I love a lot of the things you guys are saying. He has an incredible arm. The arm talent is there. But for a guy who he had 8 biodegradable nails inserted arthroscopically, and he missed his senior season in high school. From there, he had a second surgery where a piece of his hip bone was inserted into his knee. This is a guy who, he has a degenerative knee issue, and I just don't think that you can really invest anything in him beyond being a maybe 6th or 7th round pick, because I don't know. I just feel like you can't really have him on your draft board. It's terrible. It's a really sad situation where, he clearly wants to play football, and he's clearly a talented quarterback in terms of his arm and some of the other intangibles. But that knee problem really just it makes him almost undraftable.
It ain't going away. Tom, Steve, any comments?
Yeah, I would agree completely. I mean, I think if you're going to take a risk on a player with injury in the draft, you might take a risk on someone like Derek Stingley or someone like that, but not Carson Strong.
Given how our picks line up as well, like I'd be disappointed if we took him with one of those top 100 picks, especially given the other talent around at those times. If we ended up taking him at 177, which I think is then our first pick in the 5th or whatever it is, but I'm probably okay with that. But yeah, I can't justify using a top 100 pick on a guy with issues who, like you say, he may never see the field. And if you want one of these guys to be in your room, you're hoping they're going to be there kind of 10 years or so, right? So yeah, for me, it would have to be a late round flyer. There's talent there. He can rip it. He was actually a bit disappointing again at the Senior Bowl. I thought playing in shorts, I thought he was going to really be able to showcase some of those physical gifts, what he can do with the ball. It didn't necessarily come through, but yeah, it just has to be late if he ends up going. It wouldn't surprise me if he was UDFA.
All right, we're going on to the home stretch now, the final 5. We're starting with Ant's final guy, Caleb Ellaby out of Western Michigan.
Yeah, so the homegrown guy out of the 3. So yeah, he's been the quarterback at Western Michigan for 3 years now. They play in the MAC in the FBS. So
just wanted to say as well that you can't speak ill of him because Laura Schlitt might have a go at you. Just wanted to put that out there.
Hang on, I've been very nice about Caleb. I specifically requested Caleb Ellaby because I like him. So I'm not going to say anything bad about him. As I was saying, he plays in the Mid-American Conference with Western Michigan. So they're in the FBS. So out of all the guys I've done so far, he plays at the highest level of all 3. He's 6'1", 210 pounds. So the least statured out of the lot of them there. His career, he's thrown 420 passes out of 661. It's a 63.5% completion rate in 6,068 passing yards, 45 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. He's also got 13 rushing touchdowns, but don't let that fool you. His average rush is 0.5 yards per carry. He's like CMC in the final 5 yards, but outside of that, he's like the Detroit version of LeGarrette Blount, as in he can't run fish. Yeah, if you get what I mean. So yeah, he's the unorthodox quarterback out of these ones for me. So relatively speaking, he is undersized. He does not have the strongest arm of the quarterbacks in this class. And again, while he is playing in the MAC, it's not the highest level of competition in the world. He could be at a high level playing against some better defenses there. However, what does work in his favor is Western Michigan run a pro offense, sort of the offense that the NFL is moving towards now. So you've got the mesh point reads, you've got the RPOs, the moving pockets, all that sort of stuff. He is very versed in how to play this system, and it's what a lot of teams are moving towards now. So his adjustment time to the league will be a lot quicker than the guys that I've been talking about before and some of the other guys who you've been mentioning as well. So in terms of him as a player, the leadership abilities with him are very clear. He's been a multi-year starter there now, and he's led West Michigan to some really impressive victories in his time there. He's been clutch on some comeback drives. They took down Pittsburgh this year, which was a really big result for them. Kenny Pickett in Pittsburgh, that was a big result. He was able to lead them to that. So he's got the leadership intangibles in there. As I said, he's not the most mobile quarterback in this draft. He does possess the short area speed, though, to be able to get himself out of trouble when he is in the pocket. So it does kind of negate the lack of mobility a little bit there. He's not one who's just getting stuck in treacle and getting taken down very easy. He can look after himself when the pocket collapses. And again, if the spaces open up, he is able to take advantage of that. And as I say, if you get him within the 10-yard line, he's very dangerous when it comes to forcing the ball into the end zone. Mechanically, everything is really pretty much sound with him. Like I say, he works in a pro style offense, so he is designed to play at the next level. So a lot of the mechanics are already in place there. You see the progression reads, they're very good with him. They're top notch. In fact, to be fair with him, again, with the scheme they run, they have to be. A lot of RPOs in there. You've got to be very, very good with your scanning of the field to see what's going on there, depending on what you're going to do. One of his biggest things is, though, he's a great protector of the ball. As I say, it's 4 touchdowns to every 1 interception that he throws. It's not very often he do it. The throws, you can see they're always calculated. He doesn't go for the high risk, low reward ones, a la an EJ Perry, who's got a lot of interceptions there with him. You don't see the crazy throws into double coverage. Again, he looks at it, he judges it on his merits, and he will not give the ball away easy. He's only had 2 games in his career when he's had multi-pick games. So overall, he's incredibly good at looking after the ball. Passing wise, deep, again, not the greatest thing in the world that you're going to see when it comes to the arm strength there, but he can get it to the boundary. He's got lovely touch on some of his throws out towards the boundary, but he really excels with the spot throws down the middle of the pitch. Again, a lot of that RPO stuff, he's very well versed in it and very good at it at this point in time. So again, there is a lot to like about him here. Now, obviously, you have to mix that up with the bad as well. So obviously the level of competition is one. Again, going to be coming up against a lot stiffer opposition than what he has been used to in college. And you have to take the intangibles in. The size is a problem. The arm strength is a problem. His size, with the way he releases the ball, there's a lot of risk that some of his passes are going to get battered down, especially amongst the bigger defensive ends and the defensive tackles. There are issues with this in college, and that's going to follow him through into the NFL. The accuracy under pressure is a big issue. There are a lot of examples where you see him getting pressured. He will launch a ball downfield. The trouble is he will airmail it. He's putting that little bit extra on because he's panicking and wondering whether he can get it there or not. And that finesse, which he really has, just sort of goes out the window there. So that's an issue for him that he's going to have to get better at. Also can't really throw off platform either. You're getting rolling out the pocket, trying to throw on 1 foot, etc. That's not really his thing either. And again, the lack of mobility, whilst it's not a problem, him getting sacked and that, it will be an issue when you're trying to salvage busted plays. If you're trying to extend plays a little bit, it's not going to be his forte to be able to do that. But again, this is a guy who understands the pro system. He does have the intangibles to work with to create a successful quarterback there. I think the only thing that works against him is maybe you're spending a higher pick on him at this point. Teams will like that he's played in the pro style offense, and they will like what he brings to the table. So maybe the value is not going to be there. But in terms of a homegrown option for as a quarterback, he's a decent option to come in and be able to put pressure on guys as we go forward. But out of the 3, he's probably the one I might least go for, but I think he's going to have a successful career if he lands in the right system. So yeah, that is Caleb Ellaby.
The rest of you guys seen anything from Caleb? I know he's one of the guys that's kind of like the top out of those next set of quarterbacks after the top 6.
Surprisingly enough, even being here in Michigan, I didn't get an opportunity to catch a lot of Western Michigan games, but seems like a UDFA. Just seems like somebody who at least has some of the moldable talent that could end up being a productive member of a quarterback room. Not necessarily somebody who's going to be starting on Sundays, but somebody who can, hang out in your room.
I mean, I think the thing for me about Ellaby is that watching him play, I'm really impressed, but I just don't think he translates. So, and you said he can't throw off platform, and yet he's 6'1", and his release point is a bit lower. So, if he can't throw outside a structure, he's a pocket passer mainly, and he's smaller, and his release point is lower, I think he's going to really, really struggle at the next level. I just don't think he translates whatsoever, and I think he's going to get drafted, and I think someone's going to be disappointed by him. So I think when I watched him, I thought I saw something that I wanted to see from Bailey Zappy. I prefer Ellaby over Zappy because he really does have the ability, like you say, to make throws you want to see out of someone. But physically, I worry about him. The way he does things. Maybe it's coachable. Maybe you can get that release point higher. Maybe you can get him better on off-platform stuff. But this feels to me like a long shot than some of these guys who are a bit more physically gifted. All right, let's move it on, shall we? To our fourth to last. Matt Corral from Ole Miss. Steve, you're first.
Okay, so Matt Corral, QB for Ole Miss. He's 6'2". I've seen his weight vary between 205 and 212 in terms of how it's been reported. This guy, he didn't perform at the combine. He had a high ankle sprain. I think he picked up in his bowl game. But he is a guy who's known to be quick on his feet. So in terms of the sort of positives around Corral, I mean, you know, he's a really good athlete, and he can certainly get to the edge on design runs. Probably like his biggest thing is like his quick release throw. I mean, just from watching a bit of tape, he really is a lovely thing of beauty just to behold, the way he absolutely flings it out. Like the ball comes out of his hand at such velocity. He's kind of almost got a slightly like funky Phil Rivers type baseball thing that he does. But the ball absolutely comes flying out. And he's also really good at throwing on the run as well, but definitely like a quick twitch player. I would say above average accuracy at the kind of short to intermediate level, can occasionally be off with the long ball. But, you know, he does have a big arm. He can sidearm it as well. At his pro day, he was sort of consistently throwing like 55 to 60-yard balls. I think it was the game against Alabama where he was kind of totally off balance and he threw a 60-yard pass. So, you know, the arm strength is definitely there. And he's a really tough and competitive guy, absolutely not bothered about taking a hit despite his build. But, you know, in terms of that build, he is below average in terms of sort of height, bulk, muscle mass for the NFL. And that's kind of going to make him susceptible to injury. And we've seen that in this season. I would say the other thing, which is a really big thing for me, is just the offense that he's been running. Like they've been playing 60% RPO at Ole Miss, and I'm just not sure how translatable his form and what we've seen from him would be at an NFL level. I mean, he's absolutely, you know, given it, you know, one read and then he's tucking and running all the time. And in terms of a proper NFL offense where you've got the kind of drop back concepts, I just think that's a big question mark in terms of how he's performed at college and what that looks like in the NFL. He's a bit inconsistent in terms of his timing. But, you know, I think he's someone that's got so much upside. I mean, he's really caught the eye of a lot of the NFL scouts. I've seen him around the 5 or 6 mark. But, you know, I mean, Chris Sims was absolutely raving about him and had him as his number 1 QB in the draft just the other day. Sims was, you know, Sims is a polarizing character. We've discussed him before, but he certainly seems to know his QBs, and he was really, really positive that Corral has got, the kind of abilities that puts him ahead of anyone else, admittedly in a slightly weaker class. So, I mean, through 67.9% accuracy, 20 TDs and 5 interceptions last season, I think he's going to go first round. I think someone's going to fall in love with him. I don't think it will be the Lions. But yeah, for me, there's a lot of question marks in terms of how ready he is in terms of, you know, the offense he's been playing and could he cope in the NFL?
I mean, I know that Chris on yesterday's POD was saying that Bucky Brooks said he was one of only 2 guys who had a first round grade on him. Tom, have you seen much of him? What do you reckon?
Yeah, so I'm I think similar to you, I'm low on this class overall, but Corral is actually the guy that I probably have in the top two. I like him a lot. I like the improvement I saw from 2020 to 2021. There were a lot of questions around accuracy, decision making, and he took positive strides. He's by no means perfect in it, but it's that kind of development which I think is impressive. Like his throwing motion, we talked a lot about mechanics today, but he generates a lot of power out of that motion. The guy's just a gamer. I don't like that phrase, actually. I don't know why I said it, but he is. He's one of those guys that you kind of want to go to battle for. I worry about the progressions, which you touched on there, Steve, in terms of how he's going to adapt to an NFL offense. My biggest concern with him is frame and durability. So you mentioned earlier around the kind of lazy comparison of Sam Howell as Baker Mayfield. I actually see it more with someone like Corral in terms of how he uses his body, and he's more mobile than Mayfield, but Mayfield was kind of 15 pounds heavier than he is. And you've seen how beaten up he's got being in Cleveland behind one of the best lines in the league. And my concern with Corral is by wanting to show that he's tough, he's physical, be a leader of men on the field, that he's going to struggle to stay on it.
You can see his teammates love him. You can see like he's absolutely loved by his team, and it's almost like he's too brave for someone. You know, he's kind of got that like kind of Mighty Mouse thing where for someone of his frame, sometimes he tucks and runs, and you can kind of see the hit coming, and you're wincing before it's even got to him.
So, I mean, I learned a lot about Matt Corral through our Ryan this year. He was high on him when we started the college podcast last year. And I've watched him very closely this year as a result of it. And, you know, the one thing you want to see with the college players, you want to see them develop and get better. And he's done that no end this season. I mean, for one, I love how, you know, he only runs if he has to. This is a guy, he's got a lot of rushing yards behind him, and he is a good runner when you want him to be, but he always looks for the pass first. And he only starts rushing out the pocket if he can't get it out his hands. I like that trait about him. And, you know, I like how he doesn't try to give the ball away. You know, the ball security was the big issue. Last year, he had some horrendous games. He gave up, 6 picks against LSU in one game. He threw 5 picks against Arkansas in another game. He threw a couple of picks against Auburn. That was Ryan's big thing on him. He needed to eliminate the turnovers this year. There were about 15 or 16 of them. He only threw 5 this year. They played LSU again. They played Alabama. They played Texas A&M. Some top-level guys he's coming up against on defense, and the ball security was solid. So he's obviously learned his lesson from that. He's a lot more careful with the ball. He's built tough in the mold of Sam Howell. You know, he's got a lot of likable traits to him there, and he's done really well. And he's just suffered because he got injured in the bowl game. That's why all the players drop out the bowl games, because it doesn't really give much to them. But he wanted to do it for his team. He wanted to help them win. And, you know, it just speaks out to the kind of player it is. And it's really unfortunate that he's lost all this time because of that. But, you know, he's developed a lot this year. He really has. And he's only going to keep developing and getting better. So who knows where his potential ceiling is if coached in the right system.
Yeah, I was a bit higher on Corral. I think at different points in this season than I was in the preseason. But I think watching him over the course of this season, I did see somebody who, like Tom said, and he hates to use this phrase. I don't mind using it, but like he's a guy who is a gamer. Like he really wants to. He really wants to play for his team. And, you know, as Anthony just mentioned, you know, he's a guy who was willing to play in his bowl game because, you know, he was playing for his team. And I think as a prospect, though, I'm not sure how much more to his game there is to be found. Like I'm not sure how much more ceiling there is to his game. Like a discernible, you know, ceiling to his game. Like, yeah, he can improve for sure. He can become quicker with his reads and through his progressions. And, you know, somebody had mentioned, you know, Matt Waldman and the great work that they do on their quarterback film breakdowns. You know, they did a great one on Matt Corral. And I think one of the things that they pointed out is yes, when scouting an RPO quarterback, you have to find the opportunities that he wasn't operating in that system, and how did he react, and how did he go through his progressions, and what kind of plays did he make. And Corral, it's hit or miss, right? Like there's some good, there's some bad. And, you know, it's going to be up to a coaching staff to see if they can just get the most out of him. It's just, I'm not sure how much the most is, if that makes sense.
Just to round this off, I don't like Corral. I really don't. In him, I see someone who I think is really, really, really overrated. Like, he does what he does well, but I don't think he translates to the NFL. Much like kind of with some of the guys that I said earlier, I think his frame is an issue. I think that, you know, if Philadelphia can be revived from 2017, he's a kind of plus athlete, maybe slightly more accurate version of Nick Foles. So he can win you a Super Bowl. But the stars have to align for that to happen. And, I mean, very few people run RPO to that extent. And, you know, okay, so we're forcing him to drop back now. And how does that look? I'm not confident in it. He improved, but he improved from a low base. Like, improving is relative, right? He started from a very bad place and he got better. Okay, can he improve to a really good place? I have doubts. That's just where I'll leave that. But he's if Strong
That's
didn't
very
have
harsh.
then yeah, it might be, but that's where I sit with him. If Strong didn't have his knee injury, I'd have Corral as my quarterback 6, but he sits at quarterback 5 for me. There we go. Right, we'll move on. Sorry. Well, okay. I'll agree with you if it makes it easier, man.
No, not at all.
Right, we'll move on to our third to last guy, and I have the pleasure of introducing Kenny Pickett to you all from Pittsburgh. I know that he is the other guy on Bucky Brooks' list of first-round potential quarterbacks, as mentioned on the POD cast yesterday. Go and check that out. But Kenny Pickett, quarterback from Pittsburgh, playing as the number 8. He is a super senior, 23 years old, but he will be 24 shortly after the draft, so a bit of an older quarterback. He is, and it will surprise a lot of people because he's always kind of portrayed as this super accurate guy who perhaps doesn't do a huge amount outside the pocket in terms of, I think, if you haven't looked at this particularly much, but he's a really athletic guy, and it actually comes through really, really well on tape. 9.54 on the RAS scale from MathBomb there. His 10-yard split is 1.56. That's 9.93. So in terms of short area burst, he's really fast. He was 4.73 over 40, but how often does a quarterback actually run that far? Elite explosion grade 2, so that's really, really encouraging to see. And that's where I'm going to start on tape. He's a really good runner. Like, the guy's got wheels. And maybe one of the problems is that he actually relies on that too much and bails out of going through his progressions to rely on his running ability. But he enjoys it. You can see on the field that he likes bailing out of pockets and running for 7 yards because he knows if he runs 7 yards for every play, he's going to win games. And unfortunately, I don't think he's quite quick enough for that to translate at the NFL level. He's not a Malik Willis level of athlete. He is better than Sam Howell in terms of athleticism, but it's close. But the guy absolutely loves the physicality of the game. He loves contact. So, you know, this is a really kind of guy that you want to kind of... He's going to get people off their seat and cheering for them, and it's a really cool thing to see. He's, as I said before, in terms of accuracy, very accurate quarterback. When I say accurate, I mean that he's getting it to his guy, but he's also getting it there in stride, and he's doing that at all 3 levels, struggling a little bit more deep, but not a huge amount. Like, he's got a really, really good arm and gets it there more often than not. His completion stats slightly overinflated because he does like the shorter pass sometimes, and he's very proficient at doing that. I didn't actually do his stats, so I'll do that quickly. 6'3", 217, 52 games because he's spent so long at the college level. 1,045 completions at a rate of 62%, 12,303 yards, 7.3 yards per attempt, 81 touchdowns, 32 interceptions in 2021, 13 games, 67% completion rate, so much improved on the rest of his career. He's a bit of a one-season wonder when it comes to his final year was much better than his previous years. 4,319 yards, 42 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. So over half of his career touchdowns came this season, despite the fact that he's been a starter for 4 years. When it comes to decision making, even though he does get it to people in the stride and he is very accurate, he is reluctant to throw wide receivers open. And as I mentioned before, he can bail out of pockets too soon. More often than not, he's reading one guy and he's getting rid of the ball. But this is despite Pittsburgh perhaps having it's not a pro-ready offense, but it's not Ole Miss either. Like, there are some NFL concepts in there, but he's kind of acting like it is almost an RPO type offense or an air raid type offense where you're kind of doing one read and getting rid of it. Like, if his first read isn't there, he's tucking it and running to a fault. And then it's glaring because he's a really good runner at the college level. So why did he need to do any more? And I worry about him being able to get through his progressions. Pittsburgh are scheming it for him to be able to do that. And it's unclear as to whether that's because he's physically incapable of doing more, or Pittsburgh saw that as the best way to win. I mean, in the competitive ACC, you want to beat Clemson, and that's what they came out to do. So, and they managed to do that. There are clear examples though of him getting through his progressions. It's just inconsistent in terms of his release. Quick and clean on the short to intermediate routes. One of the things that I'll come on to my player comp in a minute, but one of the things is that going deep, he really elongates his throwing motion to get it down the field, and that will bring me on to my comp in a second. But pocket mobility, he's really adept at kind of making a step. When he does feel pressure but hangs in the pocket, he can make a side step and he'll buy just enough time. He's not afraid to take a hit. And it's like, okay, so why are you bailing in the pocket then too often? Because you can do this. So please just hang in there a bit more, because he is able to do it. But he's an athlete. He's got the explosion. He's got the speed. He does the read option and design runs really, really well. My comp for him is a slightly more athletic Jared Goff. And that worries me a lot. His throwing motion it's so like Jared Goff that once I thought of it, I was like, oh, I can't unsee this anymore. Like, the way he kind of comes over the ball in that sort of really nice throwing motion, it's in rhythm, and it's really lovely. Jared Goff has a lovely throwing motion. If you don't like it, I don't know what to say to you, but it's, when he's going deep, it's a second slower, maybe, or half a second slower than if he's going short, and that's not translatable, because those routes that take a little while to progress, when you're throwing deep, you don't end up getting a lot of time, because you're giving people a lot of time to get to you. You can't take that extra half second, so I worry that the field shortens for him in the NFL, and he's very good at doing those short and intermediate throws, but it's one of those things where, because he's been in an offense for such a long time, he's been the starter for such a long time, because he's an older quarterback, how much more is there for him to learn? How much more can he progress from here? He, I don't think, is pro-ready, potentially as much as other people have suggested, because how many offenses out there in the NFL really only look at one read most of the time? There's not many of them. So I think that he's someone you need to sit for a year, and that's shortening his career even more. I worry about that, but there's a lot to like about this guy, and there's leadership there, the way that he does kind of want to run and truck people and be physical. He's a leader, people love him. That's Kenny Pickett, boys. What have you seen from him? Anyone?
I guess I'll jump in here real quick, and I'll say that Kenny Pickett is probably the most pro-ready of any of the quarterbacks that are in this class. I think that he's probably most likely to get a start than any other quarterback that's in this class. With that being said, I have serious question marks about Kenny Pickett, just because why did it take 5 years? Why did it take 5 years for us to get to this point where we're having this discussion about Kenny Pickett? And there are the concerns, right? There's the idea that, okay, it might be a 1 year wonder. I do think that the hand size, and we've gone I think, this entire time without talking about it, but like, I think it's a legitimate concern. The fact that he has to wear, 2 gloves just to accommodate for it, because like some people will say it's not an issue. It is. It 100% is an issue. But I think to your point about him having the mobility and having the athletic chops to do the things that he did in college that he might not get away with in the NFL. I just see, when I see Kenny Pickett in the pocket, it looks like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the 1966 Batman film, but it just reminds me of Batman running through the town with a bomb. Just because he gets so happy feet in the pocket. It just seems like you said, Matthew, to your point, like, he sees his first read. If his first read isn't there, I'm Kenny Pickett. I'm athletic enough to, scramble for a few yards. And that's a positive play for my team. I don't know if those plays happen at the next level for Kenny Pickett. So he's a little bit further down on my board as far as quarterbacks go.
So, yeah, I mean, Dan Orlovsky did a really good breakdown of him on Twitter the other day. And he was talking about the pocket mechanics and how, they're really not great at this moment in time. There's a lot of examples of him where, like Ryan says, he gets happy feet. He's bouncing around on his feet, but more than that, he's drifting off the line of scrimmage. So where the ball's getting snapped to him, when he's dropped back into his read, he's a yard or two either side of where he's been, and it's putting his tackles under pressure, because his tackles go in from a situation holding him off. He's having to hold it longer. They're one-on-one. He's inviting the pressure. Yeah. And this was it. That Dan did a really good job of breaking it down. The pocket mechanics are a real issue. So he goes running when he should be looking through his reads instead. But it's just because of those mechanics in there. He's not dropping back straight. He's not dropping back with his feet planted. And again, he's meant to be the most experienced quarterback in this draft, who's been in college forever. He should not be having mechanics issues like this deep into his college career. And it is concerning.
I think I picked up from listening to your college podcast, and was it like in his first or second year, he had like a terrible O-line and he just got murdered all year. And then he just seems like skittish and kind of like almost like overreacting every time like he faces pressure. He's just absolutely like as though he's kind of just scarred from like the experience he's had previously. And now he's just got to like either get rid of the ball or just like, just set out for the sideline. He just doesn't seem like he's got that calmness that you kind of need in the NFL.
I'm sorry, did you say Jared Goff? Because that from the start of the season, that's what
he doesn't wheel out though. He never wheels out the pocket though. That's the one big.
No, that is
there.
True.
He doesn't bend a mile to the left.
Yeah.
He just straight out runs.
To call it wheeling out, Anthony, is that's a disservice to Wheels, man.
Tom,
sorry, Wheels.
Any comment?
I think you guys have summed it up perfectly. I think when I watched him, I was actually surprised going in. He's more athletic than I thought he was going to be. I think his athleticism is underrated. I was actually just looking up some of his numbers there, and his numbers are almost identical to Josh Allen, who had 20 pounds on him, and obviously a very different kind of player. But I think underrated athleticism, but overrated in really the other areas, which are the critical ones. So
there we go. All right. Final two, then penultimate guy, my QB1. Steve, you're taking Desmond Ridder of Cincinnati.
Okay, so we've got Desmond Ridder, wears number 9, QB for the Cincinnati Bearcats. This guy is a pocket QB. He's one of the biggest guys in the class, 6'4", 215 pounds. He's not like particularly like bulky. Like he has been called like undersized in terms of like his frame. So I definitely think, a bit of time in the weight room, he's got the ability, because he's got that 6'4" frame. He'll definitely like fill out. I mean, there's been a conversation about who's got the stronger arm, him or Pickett. I think Ridder's got the stronger arm. He's got a really good throw. He's got that arm strength to drive the balls, right across the field. He can really attack all areas of the defence. There has been some accuracy issues, which I will come on to. He's a guy who's definitely, I think, is playing for one of the most mature college offenses that is probably the most like an NFL offense. Obviously, it's still a way off, but this is a guy who's used to like a kind of like run first spread system. But he's making a lot of dropbacks. It is more similar to the NFL. When you think about the kind of stuff that Matt Carroll's playing at Ole Miss. He's quick on his toes. He can throw inside. He's got good speed. I think he ran 4.49 40, 9.8 RAS score. So this is an athletic guy. He's too has got a slightly elongated throwing motion, and that has led to some accuracy issues. He's in terms of his accuracy, he doesn't miss by much. Like he's, when you see like Josh Allen or Justin Herbert miss, they tend to like miss by like way off. But he never is really bad with a throw. And when he is slightly inaccurate, the balls are normally catchable. But again, in the NFL, that's going to get punished. He's going to throw some picks if he can't sort that out. I think one of the things is for a guy who is athletic and has got really good feet, he does kind of throw quite flat-footed. When he drops back, he's quite upright. And again, this is something that maybe get like coached out of him. And he's not great throwing on the run. He's been described as one of the most NFL-ready QBs. I think he's more ready than Pickett. I think he's got that refined ability to progress, to make his progressions. Like when you look at this class of QBs, Ridder is a guy where the ball is out there before the wide receivers like out of his break. He's already making those anticipated throws. And you don't see that a lot with some of the rest of this class. They're waiting till the guy is screaming open before they're letting go of the ball. Ridder's not like that. The ball is out there nice and early. He's got that post-snap processing. You can see him going through his reads. You see it on some of his best games, like when they played Indiana, really, really, sort of strong in that part of his game. And he's also someone who's improved every year. He's a 4-year starter. He's absolutely made those progressions. Comparisons. I think people have, a lot of people have said Ryan Tannehill, Dak at a push, or maybe like, at worst, an Alex Smith. In terms of, in terms of the downside, I think there's definitely still some coaching to be done. And then, for me, on Good Morning Football, he was asked, what's like his favorite like piece of music. He could have said anything. He could have said absolutely anything, but he said Complicated by Avril Lavigne because the draft is complicated. And as someone who's invested in music behind me, I found that comment, if it had come from a 13-year-old emo girl, I'd have been quite happy. But going back to what Ryan was saying earlier, I have a feeling that Des Ridder's yearbook will be an absolute horror show. I can only speculate of what's written in there. We shall see. That's my Des Ridder.
And
well, you know me, I'm a fan of I'm a fan of Desmond Ridder. I'm going to straight out the bat say he's the best leader when it comes to quarterback in this entire class. He has the best leadership qualities. Him and Luke Fickell have really renovated that Cincinnati Bearcats program. They are a non-Power 5 team, so to anyone who doesn't know college, they don't play in what are considered to be the top 5 conferences in college football. It's not necessarily the most glamorous where the best players go. And over his time there as a starter, they have come so far forward as a team. Oh, hang on, bloody hell. I had something go off in my ear. So yeah, like I say, he's brought them so far forward to the point they were in the college football playoffs this year. Power 5 teams very rarely get there, but that is the season they've had. They took down Notre Dame. He threw for over 300 yards against Kyle Hamilton and co there. Yes, they did only play one other ranked team along the way, but they still had to win these fixtures. And yes, they did get blown out a bit by Alabama when they got there, but Alabama are a bloody good team all the time. So, in terms of leadership, he's helped bring that franchise forward. He's put them on his back and he's really dragged them forward into the new age as far as they go. So I love the leadership qualities about them. Yes, the accuracy is infuriating. He's got the range of passes. It's just sometimes you just wish you could kind of just hit him and go, come on, just knock the marbles a little straighter. And those passes, as Steve said, they're not far off, just a teeny tiny bit more accuracy. And you'd be definitely talking about him as quarterback 1 in this draft by a long stretch of the imagination, I reckon. That's just the big issue he has there. In terms of just stopping him from really being top traits at the minute. But again, I like him. I like the leadership. He's got a great backstory. He's fought through it all. And I think he's really going to take to the next level and prove a lot of people wrong, because people see the school and they're like, maybe he's not got it, but trust me, he does.
Ryan?
Not a lot to add about Desmond Ridder. I think you guys talked a lot about, the throwing motion, being a big guy, but being slender, beat up on really bad competition, playing for Cincinnati, I think is something, but I think that there is really something to say about him as a leader. And I think that his work ethic and his leadership probably, goes to talk about who he is as a person, and that stuff does matter in the NFL for sure, especially if you're going to be a leader of a football team. So, I'm not on board with Ridder being the guy at 32, but I'm just kind of not on board with any quarterback being the guy at 32.
Tom?
Yeah, won't add too much. For me, I see a little bit of Jalen Hurts. Proven winner, leader, great athlete. When he's on, he looks really good. I think you mentioned that Notre Dame game. I was scouting Hamilton, and he just looked so in control of everything, to be honest. I was really impressed. And he does have that poise, but there's the same kind of question marks, which you've all touched on. So I was really hoping he came out last year when I hadn't seen as much of him. I really liked him as that kind of second round option maybe for the Lions, but I probably soured on him a little bit.
I think the thing for me is, if he's got the ceiling, then I really love him, and I'm struggling to determine where his ceiling is, because in terms of physical traits, he's got the live wire arm. He's got one of the better arms in this class. He's definitely got the athleticism. So if you talk about a toolsy guy, and we're going to talk about a toolsy guy in just a second, I think that Ridder needs to be mentioned in the same breath as Willis when it comes to this sort of thing. Willis is faster, but I think it's margin. So Ridder runs a 4.49. I think the Willis would have run in the low 4.4s, maybe touch a high 4.3. That is something, but it's not nothing. And I think that Ridder needs to be part of a NFL coaching staff and to be in that for a year. I know that people say he's pro-ready, and he's the most pro-ready. But when it comes to fixing up his accuracy and his mechanics, I think he needs to sit a year, much like a lot of these guys do. If he sorts that out, I think the sky's the limit for this guy, because, you talk about Strong and he's a statue, you talk about Corral and he's an RPO guy and does that translate and this and that and whatever. But Ridder, pro concepts, got the arm, got the legs. What more do you want from someone in the leadership? The guy has done more pro-ready stuff than Malik Willis and is just a little bit less athletic. So why are we not mentioning them together?
And is about 4 inches taller.
And that does make a difference. But let's start beating around the bush and talk about the guy that everyone talks about at the top of this draft. It's Malik Willis. And Malik was being watched by Tom from Liberty. What did he see from many guys QB1 this year.
Right, so another 6'1" quarterback, which is the theme this year, 219 pounds. His build is very, very different to a lot of the guys we talked about. He's built like a running back, incredibly thick. Committed to Auburn originally, couldn't beat out Bo Nix in 2019, so he transferred to Liberty ahead of the 2020 season. Last year, threw for 2,859 yards, completion percentage of 61.4%. 27 touchdowns to 12 interceptions for a passer rating of 100.2. Finished the year with a PFF grade of 91.7. Doesn't have any athletic testing. He didn't opt into any of that. But as you touched on, the guy can move. So regardless of what he would have run, he's an incredible athlete. And I think as we move on to strengths, he really has, I mentioned traits earlier when we were talking about Bailey Zappy and a lack of them at the NFL level. Willis really has, other than size, pretty much every trait you could look for in an NFL quarterback. So elite athlete, has real dual threat potential. And when we talked about Ridder just then, and I mentioned he was a little bit like Jalen Hurts, but kind of Willis is on the Hurts to Lamar Jackson scale, and he might be closer to Lamar Jackson than he is Jalen Hurts. He's that kind of incredible athlete with the ball in his hands, and he shows fantastic burst as a runner as well. That combined with his thick build, he's got the highest broken tackle rate of any player in college football. Running backs, whatever. He had the highest broken tackle rate of any of them last year. So as a runner, he's incredibly dangerous. He also has top-end NFL arm strength. So for me, the strongest arm in this class. I think that really shone through in Mobile when we had that. I think it was day 2, and it was horrible wet conditions. He was the only guy who could really push the ball. Everyone else was struggling with it. Obviously, Kenny and his tiny hands. But really everyone was struggling to move the ball that day. It just wasn't a thing really for Malik Willis. I think that was highly impressive, especially when we're talking about the NFC North. Throws a beautiful deep ball. Obviously the pro day throw kind of elicited all the reactions of people losing their mind over it, and then people losing their mind over people losing their mind over it. But in general, his deep ball is gorgeous to watch. He throws a really nice spiral. It's one of the few passes which he actually does throw with touch. He can, because of his arm strength, he can drop it in a bucket. He does sometimes throw it a little flat, but when he does put it up there, it's really nice for those receivers to go out and get. Quick and tight release. It should make him perfect for kind of quick timing concepts and things like that. There are questions about accuracy we'll get to, but his release pattern really is favorable to that kind of offense. Throws at all arm angles, like a few of the guys we talked about today. Some of the throws you see are just out of this world. We actually mentioned Russell Wilson earlier, who I can't remember, and I don't think he is Russell Wilson, but some of the ways that he keeps plays alive, rolls out, and then throws a deep ball accurately really reminded me of some of those things where Wilson does. Wilson very much more someone who will run to throw, which is not Willis's game, but you get that kind of explosive plays where he can keep it alive. He's just so exciting to watch. Is really the piece here, and we'll get on some of the weaknesses. But you watch things. Well, I find I watch things, and then suddenly I'm like, man, I would love to see this guy in Honolulu Blue. It's so easy to get wrapped up in the good. There's so much of it, and then everything you hear off field is the guy's a star as a leader too. He's kind of teammates love him, coaches love him. You see the things at the combine of him handing out merch and things as well. But it's not just that. If you're cynical about one of those kind of viral videos, everything you hear about him is as a great person, a great leader. Weaknesses wise, velocity. I read my note first. I was like, velocity is an issue. And I was thinking, no, it's not. He's got a cannon. What I mean is his ability to throw touch passes. So every pass, or the majority of passes, come out at 100 miles an hour. He needs to learn to take pace off the ball, throw the touch passes, keep the accuracy on that. And that's especially on short throws. That's going to make him much more dangerous on those quick passing concepts. Intermediate throws, it can get quite frustrating. He can sail guys. And not by a little bit as well. We're talking it going way, way over his head. Ball placement is sporadic at times. I don't see the anticipation that maybe we would like to see. And we've seen in some of the other guys we talked about today. There's been lots of talk about Kenny Pickett's hands. Malik Willis's hands are fine, but fumbles have been an issue as a ball carrier and in the pocket. So there's been a number of issues where not all those fumbles have been lost, but his fumble numbers are high. And so it's something which you need to keep in mind. He does miss some easy throws because of those slightly inconsistent mechanics we touched on. He does move well off platform, and obviously he still throws it with zip, but accuracy is a little bit more all over the place there, maybe a little bit less desirable than you want. The offensive line he had is just appalling, and that's created a number of bad habits in terms of trying to escape from that. That's going to take a bit of time to get away from. Obviously, if he came something like Detroit, that's something we see as a strength. So I feel like we can get him out of those habits. Finally, just in terms of coming from a relatively simple college offense, which does play to his strengths, but he's going to take time to acclimatize to the NFL playbook and reads. Now, that being said, I thought it was almost a bit lazy when people would say that his progressions were really bad. I didn't see it to quite the same extent. He's not experienced in that sense, but I think you see times where he does move through his reads. And at the Senior Bowl, when they're focused on it a bit more, there was improvement there. So I guess we can start in terms of final thoughts with the number 2 pick. Actually, no, let's leave the number 2 pick. I'll save that for when we throw it out to the rest of you. I mentioned Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. I think the exciting thing about Willis is for all those guys' talents, they are not necessarily the people with arm talent that I think are going to take your team to the Super Bowl. I'm not saying Lamar Jackson will never get there, for example. I'm not saying Jalen Hurts will never get there. But when they fall behind, are they the guys who you're going to be comfortable that their arm is going to bring the game back? I don't think so. Malik Willis is completely different in that regard. He's still got that dual threat ability, but there is that upside with the arm that I feel like you are going to be in games. I'm not saying he's a Pat Mahomes. I'm not saying he's a Josh Allen or someone like that. But with those guys on the field, you think you can always come back from something. And I think if Willis pans out, you have the opportunity to get someone like that where you're always going to feel like you're in a game. I think he will have 4 interception games at times and things like that. And that's kind of, you're going to live and die by that at times. But I think the upside is there where he can be really, really exciting. And I think some of the concerns are slightly more overblown.
Ryan, you are a Malik stan. What do you think of what Tom said, and what's your take on Malik?
Yeah, I think Tom was extremely fair. I think that a lot of what he said rings true to the Malik Willis that I know and that I watched at Liberty. I started watching Liberty games in 2020 because I'm a gambling degenerate, and I had to bet on college football that was going on throughout the week, and there was a Liberty game on, and just turned it on, and he just jumped off the screen. And I've put together 5 reasons why the Detroit Lions should draft Malik Willis. And if you guys would entertain me, I would love to share those with you. Number 5, it makes the most sense with where the Lions are in their timeline, does it not? I mean, they have a perfect bridge quarterback in Jared Goff. They have the opportunity to let Malik Willis sit and maturate and grow with Mark Brunell. And I think that the situation is perfect. Number 4, he's the most, and Tom touched on this, I think he's the most entertaining player in the draft. Like, he's the most electric, he's the most exciting, and the Lions haven't had a player like that since Calvin Johnson retired. And, think about the way that Malik Willis will have, he will have a hand in every single play. It's a lot like, if you want to take it back even further, it's like Barry Sanders. At least Barry Sanders would touch the ball 20 plus times a game. Calvin Johnson might only get 6-7 catches. But Malik Willis would have a hand in every play. And like Tom said, there might be some games where he throws 3 interceptions or 4 interceptions. And yeah, that's how the game of football goes sometimes. But man, he'll look fun doing it. Number 3, he's not Kenny Pickett. Number 2, I'm willing to bet on athleticism, and I'm willing to bet on traits. And those are the 2 things that Malik Willis is just oozing with, right? And then lastly, it goes hand in hand with 2. It's just the absolute sky high ceiling. And at some point, a team has to bet on a quarterback. And if you want to say the Lions aren't ready to bet on a quarterback, that's fine. They can continue to team build and they can get the quarterback later. There's been plenty of teams who have gone that route, some to success and some to not. But I just think that, with a guy, there's going to be a time where you're going to have to take a risk. The Chiefs traded up for Patrick Mahomes. The Bills took a risk on Josh Allen. The Baltimore Ravens traded up into the first round at 32 to take Lamar Jackson after nobody wanted him. And, the Ravens drafted Hayden Hurst instead. But I think at some point you have to bet. If you're not willing to push your chips in on the table on Malik Willis, that's fine. He's just going to go somewhere else and you're going to regret it.
I love the kind of theory of
in terms of his high.
Sorry, just quickly. Oh no, you go.
I was just going to say, in terms of his high ceiling, I mean, like, is this guy the second coming of Mike Vick? Is that the ceiling?
Oh man, Michael Vick is the reason why I love football. I think that even growing up, I missed out on the Barry Sanders era just a bit. But Michael Vick was what captured my attention with football. And that's rare air that you're putting him into. But yeah, I mean, the ceiling is high because of the arm talent too, right? I mean, Vic had the arm talent as well. Vic also had tiny little hands, but he was able to overcome it because he was such a dynamic athlete. I'm not sure if Malik is quite the dynamic athlete that Vic is, but he's pretty close.
I think the ceiling for his arm is higher. I know that Vic had the arm talent, but he wasn't an elite passer. He was a very good passer, and he was an elite rushing threat, and I think it's just inverted with them two. So, yeah, I could see Willis doing it. It's one of those philosophical things, isn't it? Are Detroit content to say to Goff, we don't believe in you? Because I think that's what it does come down to, is we are drafting a replacement, you're here for 1 year, and then thank you and goodbye. And I don't think they're willing to do that, but is it the right decision? I don't believe in Jared Goff. I don't. And I don't think anything he's going to show me is going to change that. He had, 4 really good games at the end of the year because he had confidence and he had a reasonable team around him playing to his strengths. But you have a look at the elite quarterbacks of this league, you have a look at Mahomes and Allen and whatever, they're going to succeed with bad teams around them. I just think they will. You have a look at Deshaun Watson, and, in a 4-12 Houston team, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league and looked really good on that team. That Houston team was kind of like Detroit's team this year in terms of it was bad, but they were in every game, and Watson looked really good doing it. And I think that Malik, his ceiling is right up there. But if you kind of split a projection up into, well, his ceiling is really good, but if you break it down a bit further and say, what's the chance that they could be top 3 quarterback, high-level starter, mid-level starter, low-level starter, bust? I think that Willis has potentially the highest bust rate of all of the guys we've talked about. I think that his bust rate is higher than 50%. I think that he has the highest rate of top 3 quarterback. So I think that might be in the 5 to 10% range, and I think everyone else is lower than that. I don't see a huge amount in between. You are really, really taking a punt on him, but it's still the best choice if you are someone who wants to swing for the fences. And my problem with doing it at 2 is that I don't know how Ryan feels about this in terms of what happened last season. I really feel like we're onto a good thing with the head coach and the front office, and I'm fearful of attaching their futures to Willis when I think the bust rate is so high. I'm not sure that it's a wise move, even if they don't believe in Goff. So I would almost like them to do it, but I don't think they will. I'll let someone else speak now. Tom? Ant?
It's really tough, this is, because you know me, you know my quarterbacks. I love dual threat quarterbacks. I love Justin Field. I love Kyler Murray. I like Kyler Murray a hell of a lot. I like these guys who bring the dual threat ability to an offense, because, you know, your offense becomes so much more dynamic when you've got a guy in there. But I mean, with Willis, I loved him at the beginning of the season. I was on the train to draft him when we started this season, but just as I've watched the college season and I've progressively gone along, I'm not sure that spending the number 2 pick on him is the wisest thing. The ball security is a huge issue. I mean, last year it was 17 fumbles. Now, he worked out this year a lot better. It went down to about 4, I think it was, but his interception count doubled. You know, this guy threw 2 picks against the Raging Cajuns, 3 against Ole Miss, 3 against Middle Tennessee, 3 against Louisiana Monroe. These are many multiple pick games he's played where he's put the ball in danger. And for all the fancy stuff he does with the ball, you know, he gives it away a lot as well. And I'm just not sure that I'm not comfortable with it. His movement in the pocket, you know, I think he got sacked the second most times out of all quarterbacks in the FBS last year. I think it was 51. And yes, he's not got the best O-line in the world, but also a lot of those sacks were invited on him. You know, holding on to the ball too long, the erratic movement around the pocket. You know, we've got a solid O-line here, but if you've got a quarterback who starts wandering, starts abandoning his pocket too early and that, then it affects the way that your O-line play as well. They've got to hold on longer. They've got to, you know, there's just these little things like that that are just holding me back from doing it. And I see people say, well, he's got no talent there at Liberty with him. No one's going to be drafted. Well, I've made the comparison to Grayson McCall at Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina have the same issue. They don't have much draftable talent there. Yes, they've got Isaiah Likely this year, who has been a hell of a receiver for him. But on the whole, there's not a lot of talent there yet. They've had a hugely successful season. He's thrown just 3 picks there, and he's doing it without much of a team around him. And he's built a very solid outfit there. And I don't buy the lack of talent around him. They've won 17 games in 2 years. There's got to be some talent there, even if he's not draftable. And I just, with so much uncertainty around the pick, I'm not willing to reach for him. I think, you know, the big indicator for me is that the Giants are right behind us. And I hear all this stuff about Willis's arm being like Josh Allen and stuff like that. But the Giants are right behind us with 2 picks. And their head coach has just worked with a guy like Josh Allen for several years. He knows the importance of having a quarterback in his system like him. And he's not got that at New York. He's got the last year of Daniel Jones, who they've not picked the 5th-year option on. They're not confident on. They need a quarterback. There is not one whisper around the league of him being interested in Willis. And he knows the importance of a quarterback more than anybody. And why? Because I believe it's a reach, and he thinks it's a reach as well. And I'm not willing to put the rebuild on someone who I believe I'm reaching for. And that's just, I'm not saying I love him. I'd love for him to go back one more year. I'd love for him to transfer, go to a higher level school, get more protection, and really just get some of these problems out of his system, like Matt Corral did. He had the interception problem last year. He cleared that out of his system. He cleared the doubts about him, and now he's going to do well in the draft this year. It's just the injury that's held him back. So I'm really conflicted, but I just think it's a reach, and I'm not willing to put my hat on it. I'm willing to wait. I look at the quarterback class next year. It's not just CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. There's a lot of talent to be had that we can get at. And I just think a better opportunity will come along. But again, I'm really conflicted because he could be good. And he's the exact quarterback I want. But even if I'm still a bit iffy on it when he's the perfect quarterback for me in terms of how he plays, you see what I mean?
You've done it now, though.
I think
the talks around the Giants taking him at 5 are going to start right here. Sorry, Steve. Carry on.
I was going to say, like, I mean, I grew up watching like Michael Vick as well, and he's just one of those electrifying players that makes you turn on the TV and watch the NFL. And Ryan talking there, the romantic in me, I can feel myself falling for the guy, But then I just think back to what Ant's saying, and in terms of like the ball security and the picks thrown, and I'm just thinking about that evening when we're playing the Packers, and he's not playing against Ole Miss. He's playing against Darnell Savage and Adrian Amos and J.O. Alexander and Russell Douglas, and I can kind of almost see the nightmare unfolding, and that's my worry.
Can you also not see him running for an 80-yard touchdown to win a game late? Like, I could see that too.
You can see both.
I want to see that. I want
to see that. I do. I want to take that, but I have to keep my level-headed hat on it. I have to look at all prospects through an even lens, and I don't know. I get where Ryan's coming from. I really do, and I really like the appeal of him there. But when there's something holding me back about the decision, and I'm not sold on it, even though he's the perfect guy, I just have to figure something's wrong from my own personal point of view.
Ryan, do you want the final word on Malik, and then we'll wrap up? No?
Lions fans, you know, I said this yesterday on the podcast, but I just don't think Lions fans deserve Blake Willis. That's my pivot that I'm making right now.
All right. We're going to wrap it up there because we've been going a long time. If you are still with us, thank you so much for doing that. Really appreciate you taking time to go through the journey with us from round 7 and the UDFAs all the way to potentially round 1, if there is a round 1 quarterback, and that is potentially still in question. Next week, the podcast is going to be focusing on our first full round mock. First, I can say this. I can. First full round mock. Full first round mock draft. There we go.
Developmental.
Yeah. Yes, I know. Sorry to say what. So we're all doing a first round mock draft. They're going to be revealed pick by pick in a snake order, as if we were kind of doing some sort of fantasy football type thing. So you're going to see how we see it going in terms of either, you know, what we would do if that's how we like to pick it, or what we think the league are going to do. But you can have all that fun with us Monday, April 11th. Got the College Football Podcast wrapping up the end of the Pro Days, as Ant and Ryan was saying at the top of the pod. So that's tomorrow. Do catch up with that if you can. That starts at 7:30 and 2:30 Eastern Time in the States. Ryan, I know that you guys have an interview coming up that's going to be potentially pretty interesting.
We actually have 2. We have, I'm not going to say the names, but we have somebody from The Athletic joining us to talk about the draft this week, coming up on Thursday. And then we have somebody from The Ringer who is going to be joining us the following Thursday. So
pick a name from The Ringer that you guys absolutely love, and I'm sure that must be the guy. I'm not 100%, but it's got to be. It's got to be. Right. Don't forget to check that out and follow Ryan at Ryan_POD. And I hear Chris's voice in my head when I say that, but there's no Limp Bizkit backing me up. You can find us. You can find us on our socials at Roar the Lions UK on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Facebook group for worldwide fans, Detroit Lions fans UK, One Pride Worldwide. The website roarthelionsuk.com. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate us 5 stars. Please like the video and whatever you can do really helps us out. Just want to thank Ryan for coming on and sticking with us all this time. Really appreciate that. To all my co-hosts, to Ant, Ryan now gone, Steve, Tom, and to all of you guys for listening. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time on the Royal Lions UK podcast. Let's go Lions, One Pride.
One Pride.